Okay, I will call to order the Town of Essex Selectboard meeting for Monday, August 19th. First up, we have agenda additions or changes. Any changes from staff?
None from staff.
Anything from the board? Okay. With no additions or changes, no need to approve the agenda. Next up, public to be heard. Public to be heard is a time where the public can address the select board, comment, ask questions for items that are not on the agenda, but comment on consent items is allowed. So if you're in the room and you'd like to speak, raise your physical hand. If you're online, you can push the reactions button on the bottom of your screen, and an option to raise your hand should appear there. And I do have folks in the room, so go ahead and come on up. I can barely hear you. Your microphone? Yeah, I don't think I've ever been accused of people not being able to hear me.
It's not going through, Tracy.
I don't think the speaker's on.
You want to try it again? Yeah, Ken's, Okay. Well, I'll try to is that better? Okay. This is very close, so. So we're on the part of our agenda, public to be heard. If anyone is in the room and would like to either make a comment or address the select board, you can raise your physical hand. And if you want to come up to the table, introduce yourself and go ahead and comment.
Do I have a choice?
Yes, either or.
My name is David Scopin, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Energy Committee. A little announcement to the Select Board that we would like to change our name to Essex Energy and Climate, and we'd like to become a commission rather than a committee. So that is something we hope in the future you would be able to add to your agenda, and we can discuss that matter in detail, hopefully. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment in the room? Lorraine, come on up.
If that mic was working either. Hear David very well. My name is Lorraine Zaloom. I just had a question about the last planning commission where the the new, not called jails anymore, facilities were being addressed. I'm concerned that the public meeting law was broken because it was on the agenda and there was a request on the agenda from the state, and the public to be heard didn't happen. So if someone could look into that, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Can we look into that?
Yeah, I'll work with our community development director to check into that.
Okay, thank you. Any other items for public to be heard? In the room, online? Seeing none, we will move along to the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion, we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. There is no discussion on consent items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. Coming up, our business item, 6A, interview possible appointment of a volunteer to serve on the Tree Farm Management Group Board. I think I saw Allie.
Hi.
Hi. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving.
Sure. I'm Allie Vile. I have lived in the town of Essex for almost 19 years. I am interested in serving on the Tree Farm Management Group because they're actually a great group to meet with, and historically, my employment had me as the staff liaison for the management group. And our seat for the town needs to be filled, and I'm looking to work with them again and help them out. They have a lot still going on. They have about well, I think less than 18 months at this point on their current lease. And I don't think that they've heard from the town recently. I do believe they have their annual meeting coming up to sort of report to both the town and the city, and just looking to help however I can.
Board questions?
You want me to go?
Sure.
What do you see as the future of the tree farm, and what role do you see yourself playing in it?
I see myself as a solid volunteer, helping them. And for the future, as a resident of the town, I see the management group still overseeing the management of the facility. They've really done a great job. I've seen the committee, the management group, through variation of board members, so to speak. And this current management group is really dedicated and committed to making sure that they are fiscally responsible, and they're doing, you know, not just general upkeep, but are taking pride in repairs that are needed and upgrades that they can afford in a responsible way. There are updates that would be nice to have at the facility, but the management group has gone through, you know, kind of some financial challenges due to repairs needed for the fields that were done last summer by a tournament weekend, which really put a large dent in their bank account, so to speak. And they've bounced back really successfully with that over the last year, and continue to make improvements, and are just keeping the facility as a priority through their volunteering. They put a lot of hours and a lot of time into that facility. And I think the town needs to remember, you know, how lucky we are to have such a volunteer group working on maintaining 100 acres for our community.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One of them's kind of, I've been trying to figure out in my head how to ask it, but what is your idea of like a leadership role in the tree farm, or are you looking for like just to be a sitting board member?
Right now,
I know that's not a decision you get to make. They would obviously have to
yeah, it
vote
would be voted.
but I didn't know if you were interested in something like that.
Not at this time. Yeah.
Awesome. And then one of my follow-up questions was going to be just because of some emails we got earlier in the year about how a situation was handled about who, you know, something simple as who maintains the road. And one of my questions was going to be if you knew of any progress that they've made as far as the tree management plan, the forestry management plan, or anything for some of the requirements that they're
So regarding the forest management plan, I don't have any recent updates from my time when I was here and before Ethan Tepper left his role with the state. Ethan was working really closely with the CTE forestry program, and they're the ones that are managing the management plan. So that's been a great collaborative partnership for the facility and the school. And, you know, that's something that they really hone in on versus this current management group, who are also in communication with the forestry program at CTE. But aside from that, I am not privy to any updates regarding that. I assume they've been in a pretty busy summer schedule with tournaments earlier on in the summer and gearing up for the fall, which is actually a heavier scheduled season than the spring. So I think they're just getting the facility ready back for that main reservation season.
Do you foresee any conflicts between your previous roles and the current role that you would be appointed to?
I don't.
Excellent.
And Allie, my only question is, do you have any questions for us?
What does the select board think is going to happen at the end of 2025 that you are up for discussing publicly? And if that maybe can't be answered right now, it's not really a question, but this was prior to my departure, but remains to be the case is there's a lot of expectations from the lessee to the lessor to report back, but I continue to feel the same way that the management group should hear from both governing boards a little bit more rather than just having one expectation, a one-way expectation. Because right now, I believe the tree farm management group is still waiting to get some sort of information or invitation to have a discussion about what comes next as this lease goes into its final calendar year. And respectfully, I think they deserve that.
While we haven't spoken publicly or non-publicly about what the future of that lease may hold, it is on the select board's work plan and list of priorities to make sure that we are addressing that. That is a mandatory item on our work plan. So I do expect those discussions will start happening soon.
I think even just an email to say that to the board president, management group president would, be a nice gesture.
Gotcha. Thank you for the input. And with no other questions,
No other questions.
thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
Our next item, presentation and discussion about Charter Review Committee recommendations. I believe we have members of our committee here this evening to present.
Good evening, Charles Tabone, Secretary of the Essex Charter Review Committee. Tonight I'll be presenting for Bruce Post, our chairperson, who could not be in attendance tonight. With me I have Lorraine Zaloom, committee member, and ex officio Dawn Hill-Fleury. First, we would like to thank the Select Board and the Town Manager for your time and support in this process. We would also like to especially thank Tammy Getchell, the Assistant to the Town Manager, for all her help and assistance with this endeavor. Her support of the committee and our mission is above and beyond, and we truly appreciate it. When we were first convened to look at the charter, it was under a tight deadline that did not always allow for proper time to interact between the committee, the town, and the select board. That said, we still made significant progress that was passed by the Vermont legislature. This time, when we were reconvened, we addressed questions raised by the select board based on what was passed, in addition to 3 other areas that we'd like to address tonight. We started by reviewing and accepting the suggestions made to us by the select board. And then we moved on to these other 3 items. Energy coordinator, which is 24 Appendix VSA Chapter 117, 208A3 proposed. Essex Library would be 24 Appendix VSA Chapter 117, 401B proposed. And appointments by the town manager, 24 Appendix VSA Chapter 117, 402A proposed, meaning our recommendations. The select board should have all of our memos and 3 different copies of the charter. The one from the legislature, One that's a proposed charter with our recommendations that's marked up so that you can see old and new, and then a pure clean copy. So with that said, are there any questions that you have that you'd like us to try and answer for you tonight?
Questions from the board?
I just had a couple questions about some clarification for the library. And find the page here because I mixed them up when I
Which
came.
attachment are you looking at?
I was looking for it, just, you know.
Oh,
I think it's it was the one of the last pages of this. So my curiosity was this printout right here
Which one?
Um, I know what.
for the town of
This one right
Essex.
here.
Um,
Oh, wait, this one he's looking at?
I don't know.
Are you
it's
looking at-
attachment 4 if you have the
Yeah. it's
stapled
attached.
together
Okay.
packets.
It's this right here.
Got it.
But my question is kind of simple if it's what I think. But is this highlighted? Was that current after?
Are you
Or
asking if it's
is
state
this
statute?
an addition?
Are you asking if it's state statute?
No, I'm
Or are you
asking if it
asking-
was in the charter before.
If it was in the charter before?
No,
It wasn't.
No.
Okay.
no. So, just to give you a little background, it came to the committee's attention that there was some discrepancy between the bylaws of the library and the charter. So as we started to address that, new state legislature,
Legislature.
thank you, regarding the library came about, and it really kind of seemed to fit with with what everybody was looking for. So we kind of ended the conversation we were having, and then we went with that. And even though we're kind of citing BSA in our charter, the problem that we saw is that if you don't state it because the state's already taken care of it, then nobody knows that it exists. So part of the problem in our discussions, we had Janet Watts at one of our meetings, was that nobody knew what the answer was to certain situations. So by putting it in the charter, somebody can see, okay, oh, this is how it's supposed to work. And that's really where we went with it.
Okay. So
And- go ahead.
yeah, so that was gonna lead to my next question, but the deletion of the trustees being first chosen and then they should be elected or appointed for staggered terms. That being crossed out, I didn't see, unless I could have
What page was that?
flipped pages too fast. That's on the same page, so it's the
On
the last
attachment
page
four.
of attachment 4, and it's item B, and it's crossed through, or strike through.
Amendment B.
And I was just curious because I wasn't able to find.
Page 14?
Yep, page 14.
Oh,
It says page 5 of 9 at
Yeah,
the top of yours.
and the bottom is 14. Okay.
Yeah.
But where's the library back in?
So
here?
established, so you're talking about part 3 that's crossed out? Or you're talking about B?
B
Okay.
on the bottom.
You shall be elected. And I don't think we put that
6B,
in,
that's what
right?
Jan, I believe that's what.
And I was just curious if with the elimination there, what the repercussions would be in the charter for the select board appointing the library trustees.
We don't. They do it their own.
Hold on.
So who do we put people on the library board?
I thought they did their own.
No, we appoint them and then they hire their own director.
Right.
Right, so if you go to 401B,
You appoint them.
it's kind of
We
all
appoint them.
covered. So
But
the new,
these-
so,
So where's the
it's
what page is
I'm
the,
on attachment
is the new
3,
section?
line 306 of attachment 3, if you have that one in your hand.
306, right here.
Okay.
No, I got special meeting in 306 on this
Okay,
one.
so which attachment number on the top, what
This is
attachment?
attachment 2.
Look at
That's where I had a
attachment
hard time at home
Three.
because
It is hard.
trying to match
So
them
it's
up. And I was
line
like
329.
329. Okay. In attachment 3, appointments by town manager.
No,
Appointments
attachment
by
two,
town
the
manager.
the colorful
B.
one.
You're looking in the unmarked or the marked?
The mark, because he has attachment 2 is the marked copy.
Yeah.
So it's line 329.
It's on page 9. There you go.
Okay, wait, he's got all of them open now and you're confusing him.
Public votes.
Was it not an
Still
easy
doesn't say
exercise?
anything about the select board. And then I wasn't able to figure out which one of these
Right
is
here, yeah.
current for appointment.
All town employees not elected by voters shall be appointed and supervised. So that would cover your library board too. And that's why they took that part out.
Yeah, and Ethan, it's online. It starts on 3:30. Unless, I mean,
It says the
3:20.
appointment or election of the trustees shall continue in effect until changed at an annual meeting of the municipality. That's all it says.
Are-
That I understood for.
You're in attachment 2 or 3?
This is attachment 2, the blue lettering starting
the
at
same.
329 would be
On
the
three-
second sentence.
He's right here.
Yeah.
And it says the board may appoint. It also that was the other language that I had in my mind was the the last sentence 336 and the 337 says the board may appoint a director for the efficient administration and conduct of the library, which isn't true, right?
Which is what Tracy had a question on in the memo, right?
yeah, I did have a question on that because one could interpret that to be the Board of Trustees or other places
Right.
in the charter. The board refers to the select board, so clarifying that I think would
To add
be
language.
helpful.
So we took the language exactly from 24 BSA 143, and that's why they use the word board, because it's all in the same paragraph, so it's inferred. But we could obviously write the word select board. They could have used a few more words in there to make it more clear. They could have wrote, Board of Trustees every place so that it would be more clear. But that's not how the state did it. But, yeah, so I agree with you on that.
And the other thing that we kept tossing back and forth is clearly it's confusing. And it's confusing to keep going back and forth, and it's confusing then to have to go back to state statute. So then we were thinking we live in the modern age, 21st century, that perhaps maybe a hybrid could be that you put a link online to the charter, the state statute, and you remove it from the charter itself because it's already defaults to the state statute. And that if it was something that was appealed, then it's forever green because then when you link on it, it would be appealed. But we didn't know really how to deal with that because as a reference document, many times people have asked me where something is or what's the current document, and then you end up going to ours, and then you end up going to state statute because it's not there, and it's a lot of extra work. So we're trying to think of a way to be more efficient as a reference document. We're all ears about what you all think about a better way to do this so it's less confusing. Because clearly it's still confusing.
And Ethan, I think you were asking who currently appoints the library director, and it's that's one of the areas that's not totally clear. The library
Right.
bylaws say one thing, the charter is silent, apart from saying the manager appoints certain officials, and it implies that the manager appoints the library director. At this point, we've kind of agreed that we'll try to consult with each other when appointing a library director, the manager and the library board, but it's not entirely clear. And
I got a different interpretation from the library chair. I could be wrong, but I believe there was legal counsel was referred to and checked, and that the decision was that it was up to the trustees to appoint the director, that was under their purview.
I'd have to double check. I don't
Okay.
recall offhand. Yep.
But she said it actually went to legal counsel, that question, and the question fell in their favor.
Okay.
So that's why we're hoping Gretchen would be here tonight, because I think, they're certainly the experts in this, and however they want to do it, we support how the library would like to have it referred to in the document.
And just since we're on this section, if I
Yeah,
may,
go
that
for it.
the word may always
Yes.
is a question mark too. The
As
board
opposed
may
to shall.
appoint the director. That can, in my opinion, be interpreted if they may not.
Correct.
somebody else may appoint
I
the
agree.
director, and so
Yeah.
that word is always just kind of confusing.
I totally agree, and I
You gotta know
believe
legally.
shall was in there, in the state statute.
Ethan?
We need to make sure
So,
it carries over.
But do you know which subsection this is? Was this always under appointment of manager, or is this a subsection that got removed? Because all the Department of Libraries thing, and
The
then-
library stuff is all new, because the library
there's no
people
library
came to us and
at all.
asked us to put it in the charter.
there's nothing in there at all.
No.
And the appointment of manager was the most. I'm asking this as a sincere question.
no,
The most appropriate area to put it in.
Right, because the manager brings it to us, and the ultimate decision is the board's, right?
Not for the library
But
director.
not for the library.
Would you like it moved to
I
a
don't
different,
know.
its
I'm
own
asking.
section,
This
do
is a
you think,
question,
or?
yeah.
Oh, no, this is
Yeah.
all discussion, so.
Yeah,
any ideas
I
you
don't
have?
know. I just, when I read that section and I read this, I was really confused as to what was going on. Because to me, it was like, you know, I don't know.
Do you think it would be,
It seems
Be
way
clearer
more
if it
unclear
was
than
on its
before
own.
with not having anything. You know what I mean? Because
Would
this is like a set of words that doesn't reflect how the town of Essex is operating.
Yeah, it's almost like the assessor
separate section.
has its own section.
Yep.
And like for the sake of having the flow jive, it seems as though that would make sense more under its own. Is that,
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Because when I read it at first, I was like on the internet on the Essex page trying to find out like where this wording came from, and then I realized that
wasn't there?
it wasn't there.
It wasn't you either.
So I didn't make it up.
You did not.
But those are, I read through everything else. A lot of I have a couple small questions, but I know we're gonna iron this out more, so I don't want to pick through like single words right now. But my big question was about the library, so I'm all set.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you for your work on this, because clearly you've put a lot of work into it. So it does not go
Yeah, but we
unnoticed.
went from big pages
It was a
to
lot of-
little
I-
pages.
I
Not
like,
fun.
even though there was 4 of these,
I thought it
this
was
is a lot easier to read than the side by side, because that really messed me up. So I like this a lot better.
That was Tammy. That's why we're just so grateful for our staff.
I just had to remember which
Crack
one I
stuff.
was reading.
Oh, no, Tammy was amazing.
Did a
So,
great job.
yeah.
And having the key at the top of every page was super helpful.
Yes.
We figured that out the last meeting.
Kendall, any questions, comments?
I would just comment on the town manager section. It almost sounds like you're trying to interject the select board into the hiring and firing process with the town manager. I know it was very confusing when the town manager hired the town clerk and we just get the person. But really, that's the way a town manager form of government is supposed to work, is that the select board shouldn't be involved in the hiring and the firing of the employees, because the manager is clearly in charge of that. So I was just curious if that conflicts with that at all, the way it's worded.
Would you like to take it?
Yeah, so it's our understanding that the select board's approval is already required. So
Yes.
what we tried to do is put in an opportunity for the select board to have some interaction and some convenience of being aware of something before you're being asked to make a decision on it. And so, because we didn't change much from statute, all we did was we said that you should be consulted before being asked to approve, where it's just an approval, where the town manager can just come up to you and say, here's the people I want to hire, please approve. And then you're sitting there trying to make a decision, where if you had time to look at it and then say, okay, this is for next week's meeting, great. And then he brings it up, and then it's done. And then on the bottom half, we put in the 45 days because there is no number in statute. So, that leaves it open to things being, so I figured, well, as a committee, we figured if we put in a number like 45 days, that gives the select board time to have some meetings. And then after that time period, then the town manager can assist the select board, not give, but can have the ability to jump in and say, hey, you guys are busy, there's a lot going on, I can help with this. So that's really was the intent behind the changes we made to that section.
I also was confused by this because I wasn't sure why we were being asked to review a change for that since it was already there, and that's the little oversight that the town has is the elected members for approval, and it's been in statute for years. I mean, the last amendment was 1999, and I don't know if you were around when the police chief was hired and 60 angry people showed up at the meeting over the process, and we were hoping this would help mitigate some of those issues that might come up for some of the more important appointments. I would assume on most of the appointments there would be no discussion needed. However, I think that would behoove the town to have some say on certain special, it's a third of our budget, that at least that the members would feel that they were listened to or had concerns before a hire like that happened. So not to interfere per se, but to allow a better, more transparent process.
Okay. Yeah, it was just, to me, it sounds like the way he works it now is he brings the individual that I've hired and the board approves it to consult with the select board and gains approval. Does that mean that the board would look at applicants or consider who is being hired? Because I don't really see how that could ever work. With
It could be anything from a 5-minute conversation to something more in depth if you have some questions. It doesn't have to be this big, long, drawn-out process. It was really put in there. Like, I'm asked to make decisions all the time, and when people come up to me at a meeting and say, "What do you think? Can I get a yes, no from you?" I'm like, no. Because tell me what you want, and then the next time we meet, we'll have time to. I'm not going to make decisions without vetting them. So it just kind of gives you. We felt that we give you an opportunity to see something before you were being asked to, make a decision. Obviously, if you don't feel you need that as a select board, then that's up to you have to decide.
We're advisory only.
Yes,
Yeah.
just a
No,
recommendation.
I was just curious
Yeah.
where the train of thought was going.
So also, just to go back a little bit to the first time we convened, there was a lot of discussion over powers of appointments and hiring. So this is really like brought down, way down from where other people had different opinions on this. So it took a lot to get to this point, and this is really what's left. It's just more of like a convenience to make life working together a little bit easier, and hopefully more oversight when you want it, but not when you don't.
And it would also give Greg, if the board did drag their feet in something, to be able to say, I'm doing this, after 45 days, because it is unreasonable if we end up with a politically charged select board, which we haven't since I've lived here and grew up here, but potentially that could happen, that it would give him certainly a say to, we're doing this regardless. It wasn't about interference. It's not about you guys making those decisions. The power is in Greg's hands, certainly to hire, fire, review. But certainly there are certain positions that are pretty powerful and strong, and it would definitely benefit the town members and the board to have some kind of time frame on that, to have some discussions about what you want, what you're looking for. I'm concerned, also there was concerns about DEIs and things like that. In the past, I think that we've done pretty well, but we never know what the future looks like, right? So
That's true.
oversight is better than lacking oversight.
Okay, thank you.
Can I jump in on that topic? Thanks.
Yeah.
So I think I'm actually the one who asked the Charter Review Committee to look at this section.
Oh.
That's where that
Good, you can
question
give us
came
insight.
Yeah, and for me at least, and I've been in this position for about 2 years now, the confusing part has been that currently it says, with approval of the select board, the town manager shall hire, and it lists a few positions. In practice and in the past, we've taken that to mean, the manager wants to appoint somebody, the manager brings that forward to the select board then approves it. I could also read that and say the select board gives approval to the town manager to hire these people. Carte blanche. And so that's kind of where I was looking for some clarification. And then I say this not just for me, but for any future manager as well. We do have a council manager form of government, which I think has worked well for Essex. Part of the benefits of that form of government is that it can be more efficient. It puts the trust and the responsibility in the manager. And again, that's for any manager, not just me.
Right.
So the 45 days was a little bit confusing to me too. Is that when the position becomes vacant? Is it when the manager first brings forth a recommendation to appoint somebody? So I think some clarity around that would be helpful. And that's, especially once you get into some of these higher level positions, public works, police chief, fire chief has been added into there, town clerk. Sometimes you're dealing with candidates who are looking for new employment confidentially. Their employers don't know. If you bring this to the select board, if there's a 2-meeting process, it becomes public, and then especially if that person's not hired, it could reflect poorly on them in their current job. So I still have some questions and concerns about the way this is presented. I understand the reasoning for it, but just wanted to give you some background as to where the question came from and some potential pitfalls to the benefits that it might bring up.
That would have been helpful.
Right. So, I mean, if there's a different time frame that works better, or if for your reasons, no time frame is actually the way to go, then understandably, for those reasons, those are important reasons that we weren't aware of.
And also, I think you can meet an executive session as well to protect the potential employee.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But if some of the issue is to make it transparent and have the public involved and get
When I say transparent, meaning the elected officials, right? So because they are the town's oversight, they're the only elected people involved, so.
I can definitely see. Sorry, Ethan, I saw your hand.
I just had a quick question about that before I forget, but I've read it enough times that it's burned in my brain, but isn't that only, I guess that would be about the possible. It does say possible appointment, right? Because I know it's an elected official, town employee, blah, 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 but is it potential employee also? Is
Well,
that covered under that
it's
statute? For
I'm not sure if
executive?
I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to try to. I mean, currently it says the manager shall appoint with the approval of the select board. So is it the manager making the appointment, or is it really the select board because the select board has
Right.
to approve the manager's appointment? So are you looking at specific
I'm
positions that
asking-
are potential?
Yeah, I'm asking more about the executive session. Can you discuss that under the VSA title? Is it the possible appointment?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know if it was only for an employee, but I guess, yeah, with all of our
Potential employment.
potential
Okay.
appointments and committees.
And then also, when we look back at state statute, the town manager, if there was nothing written in to our charter, doesn't need the approval of the select board. They have those powers. So that's why, to me, it's interpreted that they approve it, the actual hire. They say yay or nay, not because you're already approved when you become town manager by state statute. So this particular part of the charter was written specifically to me as a little bit of oversight, is how I interpreted that.
Right, but you know what? I get what Greg's saying. We were trying to save words by putting that all into one sentence, when really it should have been, approval should have come after the fact. So consultation, town manager shall appoint, select board approval. So we would try, because it's all about, we don't want to make a 200-page document. We want to keep it concise and brief, and maybe we overdid it there, because I do see that what you're saying is which way do you read it. So that would definitely need to be changed. The approval has to come after, because it's the town manager's appointment, and we're just consulting with the select board because eventually they do have to approve it. You get that?
And another thought, timing can be tricky. And if
Yeah.
it's to come to the select board to have consults, to then bring it back, that could take,
Yeah.
our next meeting's not until the middle of September,
Right.
6 weeks for something to happen. We've been in a job market where people are taking jobs quickly, and so you'd hate to lose out on a good candidate.
I think you can host special meetings or request special meetings. The select
Okay.
board can as well. So that's another potential way to resolve that.
And I was just going to comment from a professional level. I appreciate the intent here, but fairly recently I've lost candidates that I was trying to hire because the state process for hiring can take a little bit of time. So wanting to attract, retain qualified and talented individuals, my concern would be the added time frame for the meetings. But that is a good point that we can call a special meeting if there is something time sensitive. Are there any other questions on this particular item?
Sorry, one more. The fire chief was an addition. Just curious as to why that was added in there.
It's an important position to the health and public safety. And certainly as we've seen calls go up, it's become more important than it has in the past.
I did have a question about the complete removal of the appointment and removal portion of the town manager section and was curious about that.
It just got moved, didn't it?
It's in red, so it was
I
deleted.
thought it
I
got
think I put
moved
it in
from
your
one
email.
part.
Yeah, you're gonna, no, go with it.
Can I
Go with
remember it?
Yeah, you got it, go with it.
Some of these were, both he and I work full time, so some of these last minute questions, we were trying to so I believe,
This is what I got from your email.
okay, it was a moot point because he already can do that and by state statute. So that's where we went, kind of wrestled back and forth to what do you put in, what don't you put in, what's making it more confusing, what's less confusing.
Yep.
So we really need, I mean, you guys will make the ultimate decisions anyway. So we kind of need you guys to help clean up how you want to do this in terms of your own work for referencing and in terms of constituency as well.
Yep.
And questions.
So it sounds like you did get my questions forwarded from.
I did.
Yes.
Okay.
We were both at work, and so we were kind of like I was trying to
We're scrambling.
yes.
Okay, so I
have it in a memo to Charlie, so we can send, because we're assuming we'll have another meeting post this meeting, so we can forward that to you, Greg, certainly,
Great.
right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I was able to answer some of them. Get answers to a number of them. If you want me to go over the ones that you sent, I can go over the ones that we addressed. Or we could just send it to you. We'll send it to
Well, and then some of them got consolidated into different areas. too,
Correct.
Yeah.
Because it was, one of the directives was to make this shorter, smaller than we originally presented way back when.
Right.
And that's what we worked on doing by putting in the state statutes instead of printing everything out, so.
It became redundant or moot because of some of the newer statutes or because we consolidated some of them. We tried to remove language that wasn't needed anymore.
Yeah, and I think most of my questions were pertaining to, like, do you list it, do you not list it? Do you
Yes.
list the statute with a hyperlink to go look it up? The other question that I did have was on 204 organization. Previously, incapacity was defined, but now incapacity was removed and it says inability. But inability isn't defined anywhere.
Right. Well, so we struggled with that a lot because of what do the words mean, and we reached out to a lot of people to try to get definitions. So, was it per the state legal counsel through Senator Vyhovsky's request, legal counsel recommended against the use of the word incapacity, and then in VSA 24 VSA 961, from there we got the word inability. So that's where we pulled it, because all of a sudden, what's incapacity? And if you make a list, then all of a sudden you have this list that's never going to be all-inclusive. Or things change, and all of a sudden something that's actually on the list really shouldn't be anymore. So, because we did start out with a list that detailed what incapacity means. And then you have to look at that list and define what that really means when somebody's not getting done what we need them to do, for whatever various reason.
Right.
So we found a state statute that includes that language, and again, we'll send that to you as well. Feel free to massage it in any way you can. The recommendation by the council was that we do list out specifically what inability is. In the statute that we found, it actually refers to mental health, and it refers to death, resigning, things like that as well. And I believe we have a certain amount of days too in there, right?
this-
If
well, yeah.
At 50%, I think,
You have to
right?
make 50% of the meetings,
Right,
things like that.
for removal. So we'll send that along as well. And we don't really know what to do with that. Certainly, Tammy went to VLCT, we went to the Senate, we went to the state, and seems like a little bit of a hot potato. Didn't know if, Greg, if wanted to have legal counsel either, because we're trying to not spend money too while we do this in terms of our research. But if that's something that you guys want fleshed out per the recommendations of the state, have at it. We can always add to charters later, right? So
Ethan?
I had one more question, and I was just trying to figure it out. But the prohibitions on the proposed changes in color, page 10, and then I have page 8 on the approved by legislator, attachment 1. Prohibitions, both are one's 50, yeah, one's 503, the other one's 403. Line 305 on page 8 of attachment 1, and line 381 on page 10 of attachment 2. But I was just curious, the purpose and the source of the added text. Because I thought it was in the original, but it's not. It's just this is the proposed unmarked. This is the approved, and it's not in prohibitions on there. So I didn't know if that was
403 or 503 became 403.
Became
Is that the
403.
section we moved the numbers up on? So it might be in there under a different number, Ethan.
Yeah, I know, but this is blue, so it says added text, not moved
it
text.
is added. And I wasn't there for that one.
So I was curious, what it protects us from, and where it came from, like legislator or somebody else's charter.
And I did ask Greg, just on
About
that
that.
point, I did ask Greg if that's like in our personnel rules
did.
as well. I don't know if,
I mean, because the first
I'll
paragraph
have to double check.
covers. I don't understand, like as a person who's a lower level reader, the second paragraph does not make any sense to me
So
because
that,
it doesn't say anything different than the first paragraph.
that section came from our chairperson. At this time, I can't say that I remember the exact conversation.
Okay.
It was a while ago that we had this conversation.
And I unfortunately wasn't there for that.
So
But we'll have time to discuss another day.
Absolutely.
Just write it down though that you want your question.
Yeah, I got it. I'm keeping this as the one that I'm gonna keep.
the main
Rest of these
copy.
don't
It's
matter.
503?
Well, this one does. This one's approved, but we're trying to change it again.
503, is that what it is?
It's 403 in the new one. It's prohibitions on both of them. I'll just mark prohibitions. That was the only other
Do you remember,
page.
Don, at all?
That was the only page that I had a mark
Can I
on.
just read it a minute? Maybe. You're saying this is what Bruce put in?
yeah,
Or this was the other chair you were talking
No.
about prior?
No,
previous.
this
is okay.
because this is new. But
Right.
this, well,
Just a minute.
We'll have to roll tape.
this section started out longer too.
I just didn't know if that was under state statute. Or if that
Go to
was-
the playback.
no worries.
I think this is something he took out of the charter from his library board that he works with.
All right,
State
so we'll
library board.
ask Bruce to
Yeah.
send a memo?
Yep.
Send an update to Greg, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in case my last one, I promise.
It's okay.
My only other one was just clarification on the new 502, line 402 in attachment 2.
The
If-
budget.
Yeah, it's, the concern is if we're mailing the annual report like we normally do, this seems to read that we would also have to send a postcard saying where you can find it electronically, so I want to make sure
Right.
that we're not,
So the intent was to try to decrease the cost to the town of providing these documents. And if you're going to mail one out to everybody, then the intent was not for you to send out postcards. Everybody's got the live document. So if we choose to go with a more modern approach and send out postcards and say, listen, come down, call us, we'll mail you one, come down, we'll give you one, whatever you want. But instead of having to print, 10,000 copies, maybe we can print 5,000 copies.
Okay.
Clean up a list.
Right.
And I believe we also put or digitally too.
Right,
Postcards or,
with digital. But, obviously, if
To
somebody
avoid
doesn't,
that.
if somebody doesn't give an email address,
Right.
digital, you couldn't do, but,
we're thinking as a cost savings measure.
yeah.
And then you had also asked about the budget, why we put budget into voting. And that was only to really clarify because the process changed. It used to be, at the meeting, you could vote on the budget. And that was just to tuck it in, that could be taken out, the word budget.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, that's, what do you put in, what do you take out, what do people remember? And it was really to prompt people to recall that it's different now. It's not the same.
Gotcha. Ethan?
You're gonna keep me talking all night because you keep bringing up all the little things I wanted to talk about. I said I
Sorry.
wasn't gonna. But my question was gonna be is if this is something that the town is considering, I would raise the concern that there should be a simple ballot item that says, shall the town of Essex mail a annual budget and
Town report.
town report yearly, yes or no, and that should be before any, as well as a question of the charter change. That way, we would get a true sense of shall the taxpayers of Essex receive the information or not receive the information. I believe that's a decision for them to make. But that was a whole longer conversation that I just wanted to tell you because you sparked it.
You're welcome, I think.
No, it's a good conversation, Ethan, actually.
So,
Yeah.
but that's it.
Okay. Is the board done with
I'm
questions?
good.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to open it up to public comment. If anybody in the room has public comment or input on the proposed charter changes, come on up. If anybody online has comments or questions, again, you can raise your virtual hand by clicking reactions and raising your hand that way.
Good job, guys.
Yes, and
Thank you
thank you
very
for the work.
Thank you very much.
Nobody wants to read the charter over and over again, so thank you.
Why not? You get to see it in your sleep sometimes.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little input on the attitude that the Energy Committee has concerning an energy coordinator. Now, I might prefer a slightly different name than energy coordinator, and it would have more to do with climate change. It would have to do with holistically looking at the entire functioning of Town of Essex in a lot more detail. It would certainly also take into consideration that we need to be resilient and that we have to do an awful lot of planning and we have to make decisions that will ensure that we're resilient. So I would hope that you would consider very seriously having an energy coordinator, even though I would rather have it named differently. But that it would be something that hopefully our committee would give you a great deal of input on, because in my mind it's a very complicated job. It is exceedingly necessary, especially in view of what we're experiencing now. The bad news is, from here it progresses. So if you're worried about getting 5 to 7 inches of rain in 5 hours, it may very well be that in 10 years we'll be lucky if we don't get 10 or 15 inches in that same period of time. So with that in mind, I would hope that we go into considerable thought and dialogue on that topic as to who would best meet a position like that, and what we call it doesn't matter. So, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the proposed charter amendments? Seeing none, we'll move along to discussion about Conservation and Trails Committee recommendation to purchase land on River Road, Vermont Route 117 for small boat access point. I apologize, we do have a hand up online. MJSS.
Hi, I don't know why it came up like that. This is Margaret. And I was also on the Charter Change Committee, and I just wanted to second their comments on Tammy. Tammy was wonderful. She helped so much. And to thank Charlie and Lorraine for their hard work in organizing the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, going back to the Conservation and Trails Committee. And I know Ken turned me down. Can y'all still hear me okay back there? From one extreme to the other. How's that? Check? Check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4. Keep going, Ken. Up, up, and away. How's that? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Conservation and Trails Committee.
So here we have Ken Signorello, Chairman of the Conservation and Trails Committee.
My name's, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead, and introduce yourself.
My name's Bino Cummings. I am on the Conservation and Trails Committee. I also am wearing another hat as a member of the board of the HOA that owns the property in question, so full disclosure there.
Steve, introduce yourself.
Steve Dowd, Conservation Trails Committee.
So my role on the committee as the chairman is I'm a facilitator and encourager, and so I'm going to basically, I have encouraged and facilitated these two gentlemen to work on this, mostly Bino, and I'll let them take over from here.
All right. Start off. Okay. So this came to my attention when I joined the committee, and one of our work items was boat access on the Winooski River. And I thought to myself, I know a property on the Winooski River that is not being used. I happen to be one of the 99 homeowners that owns that property. It's in the little document, attached document. You can see the parcel kind of outlined right at the end of 289 if you go towards Richmond. It's small, you know, but it's enough that probably you could build a small parking lot for 4 or 5 cars, and then some sort of, I'm not imagining like, you know, trailered boats going in, but somebody carrying a kayak, a canoe, something like that, and either paddling upriver and back to the spot, or you recently discovered that there's a portage around the dam. So
Well,
no, less so.
Steve, can we?
Oh.
Record and everyone's in. Could I get you in this second chair so that you're speaking on my?
Sure.
Here, here.
Thank you.
Move on down.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
There is a marked area, actually, there's a large placard that indicates there's a boat landing. It's kind of on the road to the former IBM, so it's there's a parking area. There is absolutely no grooming of any access to take a boat in and out. So it's a great place. I mean, it needs to be corrected, but it would be a way for you to get a canoe, boat off before that before the dam. Of course, there's a retaining rope and everything else like that, so you can't get yourself to the dam. But that area right there would be beneficial for what we're trying to do as well.
So yeah, we're recommending that the town either purchase or seek grants to help with the purchase of that property. So a couple of concerns that we sort of thought about as we were working through this. One was flooding. In that storm weather last summer, it never got flooded. I'm not gonna lie, it was close, but it was, you know, probably another 2 or 3 feet before it would have gotten completely under. The bank is steep and strong there, I'd say. The second one is that when the property was developed in the 70s, it was developed under Act 250, Having done research with the Act 250 folks, any accommodations associated with that travel with the property if it changes owners. So as long as it's not turned into a shopping mall, doesn't sound like it's going to be a problem for them, at least in my not lawyerly interpretations of their writings and emails and such. Yeah, I think that kind of covers our basics, unless you guys have anything to add. No?
There is an access area off of North Wilson Road. So this would work perfectly as well. If someone launched there, then this is a great way to, get your boat off of the Winooski River as well. So
That's in the town of Williston.
yeah. But it really pieces the whole thing together to have this as an access to egress, the river. There's, as Dino said too, there's no way this is ever going to be flooded. I mean, you'd have to create an area coming down. Even when it flooded more recently, and it flooded next to this area, but I actually went there and looked carefully, and it was nowhere near this higher level. So
You can't say never anymore.
yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Questions from the board?
Do you have an estimated cost of your proposal?
Well, as a also homeowner, I don't want to be involved in that too much. Honestly, I feel like that's a bit of a thing. I'll put my homeowner hat on, and I'll say I think $20,000. I guess is the number that we had in mind.
So you really, as a committee, haven't looked at pricing or what it would cost to put a parking lot in or put a portalet in or any of that stuff? You haven't gone that far?
No.
You haven't even looked at a purchase price for this land that you're asking the select board to look at?
I suppose that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question. Was I don't know. I had a question for Greg. So I was gonna ask him who is responsible for investigating potential land ownership in the town. I know we have a lot of rights of first refusal on properties and things like that. So I assume we have somebody who's on top of all those things. And then my follow-up question was going to be what Miss Dawn said, getting Public Works involved to give us a preliminary estimate on a gravel parking lot. And then the other thing is now you're talking about a boat launch, so you're going to be talking with Fish and Game, you're going to be talking with the state of Vermont, you're going to be wetlands and riverbank modification. There's a permitting process for that. So I just was curious to, as a select board, how we interpret and process the information from the request of a committee to direction of what decision do we make in order to instruct or not instruct the town to investigate their proposal. I know that you would, come to think that we would want more information from you as a committee, but also on the understanding that this is more of a town transaction that would take the proper vetting from the town manager and staff. I didn't know what the board's role was in making the decision from the committee's request to the direction of staff.
Right. Greg, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So you might have noticed on the agenda tonight, it's just for discussion. There's no action. And that's, I think, the reason being to have these conversations, to raise some of these issues. You both ask really good questions that had come across my mind as well. I spoke to Kent Johnson, our planner, who's the staff person for the Conservation and Trails Committee, Adrian Martin, our Parks and Rec director, this morning. Neither of them really have the capacity to do that level of investigation at this point. Public Works can probably put together a rough estimate for parking, of what gravel parking might cost. But to do a full-blown look at what a boat ramp might be, permitting from the state, all great things. It's just something that we hadn't planned for. It was not on the select board's work plan this coming year, so we haven't added it. In talking to Kent and Adrian this morning, that's something that the Conservation and Trails Committee might be able to look into some of these things. Steve, you just mentioned the other canoe launches in the area. Are there partnerships to build up there? Are there relationships to build up there? Trying to figure out a way, what role can we play to answer some of these questions? What role can the Conservation and Trails Committee play to answer some of these questions? But I think the first step was you had a recommendation from a committee. We wanted to bring it before you tonight and have a chance to ask some of these questions, have some of this discussion, and then get a sense of how much time do you want to spend on this, and at the expense of what. It's a great idea. It's been on the radar for a while to have another boat launch. It just hasn't risen to that top level priority because it will take a fair amount of time, I think. A couple other thoughts is this piece of land is roughly between the North Williston access and the Essex Junction access near the dam. So from a I guess geographical standpoint, it's a good location. I know Andy Watts is not here tonight. He's had some conversations and looked at some other parcels and had some conversations with the state and the Regional Planning Commission about other parcels that might make sense. So that's another piece of investigation of what other options might there be.
And another comment on that, Andy did indicate that the Winooski Valley Park District has previously expressed interest in another access point in addition to the one at Woodside. So working with Winooski Valley Park District may be an option. And he is our rep, our board member on the CCRPC, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and he indicated that the active transportation plan includes a park and ride at the end of the circ, and they're very intrigued when he suggested the option of combining functions and adding boat access. So there may be some partnership opportunities there between Essex and either CCRPC and or the Winooski Valley Park District. Ken, you had your hand up.
So please understand that the Conservation and Trails Committee has very little authority. Be careful with that. They get very touchy. We have very little authority to negotiate anything, really. All we can really do is serve as an advisory role. Now, if you give us a specific task to do, you're authorizing us to do something. We'll be happy to do it. Basically, we're trying to respond to two things the Select Board has said over and over again. We need a boat access on the Winooski River, and we need to use the Conservation Fund. Giving you that opportunity, if you have something specific for us to do, we'll be happy to do it. It is not within our purview, at least currently, to try to come up with an estimate. We figure it's budgeting time. It's a good time to figure out, well, maybe we should allocate some portion of the Conservation Fund or something on top of that to put in a parking lot and a boat access and apply for permits. Not within our purview at the moment. You can make it so. We'll be happy to oblige, but we thought we'd hand it to the Select Board to do with what you thought best.
So would there be any not making a motion, but is there any objection or does anyone see any reason why the Conservation and Trails Committee should not investigate those options? Ethan?
I would more list it as, let's ask the Conservation and Trails Committee to tell us what the price is, how many acres it is, price per acre. The Conservation Trails is well versed in water mitigation, wetland mapping.
Really want us to negotiate the purchase price?
Not negotiate, simply if something is for sale, if it's marketed. If this is not a for sale item, then it's a bigger issue.
It is not on the market.
Okay, so it's not on the market, so that's off, but we could still figure out how many acres it is. Right?
It's a quarter acre.
Quarter acre?
I mean, I'm estimating.
big.
but it's
It
not
looks
big.
more than a quarter. It looks like almost an acre.
No.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, I can walk it.
Those aren't
We can
acre.
certainly
those
get you
aren't
the
acre
size.
lots right there.
No.
We could certainly get you the size of the parcel.
Well, that'd be my question because for one,
It's probably about an acre. I walked it. I visited it. It's already got a curb cut. There's a gateway there already, so that part's settled. There's a little driveway in it now. The significant amount of work would have to be done on the river bank.
right.
No question about that. It's high.
Maybe I guess it's just a hard question.
It was our thought that the select board would direct staff to move on this. I mean, our mission does talk about us liaison with the Parks and Recreation Department and Public Works, but we did not think it was time for us to ask them to figure that out without direction from you.
It's 1.5 acres.
One.
I just found that.
Perfect. I knew it was more than an acre.
Yeah. Having
Okay, well,
having a
okay.
curb cut there, I'm not sure what it's used for. It is off a state highway. If it becomes a recreation area, the state's probably gonna have questions about how much access it's gonna be, how much traffic is there gonna be. Curb cuts are different based on the use, basically. This can be something that staff looks into, but it's something else has to come off the list. It's especially, it would be our planning department and our Parks and Recreation department doing most of this work. I think you're well aware of the amount of work they have currently, major projects for both of them. So if you do want to prioritize this, I just ask that we take a look at the work plan and figure out what becomes less of a priority.
Ethan?
So quick comment, because why I was really curious, because I don't know the price, but I do. An acre and a half for $20,000. From this is not hearing any feedback from the public, but from a personal standpoint, the town recently paid $100,000 an acre. If we can get an acre and a half for $20,000, I'd have to use a calculator because my brain's fried, but I think that's about $15,000 an acre.
Please remember, this is very restricted land. You can't just do anything you
Well,
want on this.
I understand, but there's also 14 acres of wetlands that we just purchased, so I think it's a very easy task of acquiring the land. If the deal is that good, I would recommend that the select board look into acquiring the land. The development of the canoe launch might take 5 years. But for $15,000 an acre, you cannot find land in Essex for that. I mean, you could turn that into a garden for $15,000 an acre. You could profit off it on the first year.
And understanding the interest from the Winooski Valley Parks District.
Exactly.
And limitations on staff time. I thought that might be a good conversation to have as a starting point to see
You want us to have that
what that
conversation?
partnership might look like. Greg, I assume that Kent would play a role in those conversations with Winooski Valley Park District?
Probably, we can do a quick reach out to them to figure out if they're interested in the partnership. If it goes beyond that and starting to plan and develop and talk about pricing.
Yeah.
Kent is also really busy with
Yeah.
a lot of stuff.
What is the balance of the conservation fund right now?
About $70,000.
$70,000.
I think that sounds about right.
Okay.
Thank you. That was another one of my questions that completely fell out of my brain.
I mean, to
I
me,
was actually going to
brain-
suggest that this is the perfect opportunity to do what most towns do and put forth an article asking the voters to authorize the purchase of the property through the conservation fund, subject to reduction in grants and available things. You start there, you get approval from the voters, and if they approve it, then you worry about everything else after that.
If you'd like us to write that ballot question, we'd be happy to do it.
I like that.
And your HOA knows what you're doing?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Just I better check and make sure.
So,
Good question.
the HOA, why don't you explain? The HOA owns this property and it's just,
It just sits
I
there.
know what it is. I have
Um,
some too.
It's literally no one uses it, and frankly, if there was a small boat launch, then it would probably get used more, which would be good. But it's underutilized and
limited in what it can be
limited
used
to
for.
what could be turned into. Exactly. As far as the HOA's
Competition.
awareness, the board is fully aware of the
What is it?
plan or the idea. It would be contingent on a membership vote, which wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know, my picture.
my other comment would be Andy is our board rep to CCRPC, and understanding that there may be some interest there. Conversation with Andy may be helpful to identify whether there may be some assistance or interest from CCRPC. Greg?
Maybe they can do the development, and the town would do the buy, and they would do the actual development of the property.
Possible.
Just going back to Kendall's comment about the ballot question, something we could look into. It would be a deviation from the Conservation Reserve Fund policy. It's been a while since I looked at it, but my memory is that the funds would be expended from that Conservation Reserve Fund with input from the Conservation and Trails Committee and then approval by the Select Board. So taking it to a public vote, we'd want to figure out if that sets a new precedent, if that requires a change to the Conservation Fund policy, which opens up other questions, but just some other stuff to keep in mind.
Could always flag it as advisory.
It's just like Ethan says, they're not making any more land, certainly not riverfront land.
We also spent $3.3 million without asking the voters, so.
But that was ARPA money, but not the same thing.
What's $20,000?
Taxpayers' money.
Acre and a half, and it's conservation money that can only be used for conservation. But I suggest that we table this and reconvene at our next meeting with some more information in our fifth board member.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yes. First, though, I do want to go to public comment in case there is any public comment on this item. I see a hand in the audience. Come on up. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Charlie. My family went down from Richmond to Williston on a canoe, and I feel like it would just be a bit funner if we were able to go that like extra mile and just canoe down to Essex and just have like a longer canoe trip and a shorter drive than what we originally had.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, come on up.
Charlie's dad, Mike Dimitrov. I think it's a great idea. I heard the word boat ramp thrown away and or thrown around, and just to kind of clarify, like I don't think a full-fledged boat ramp would be appropriate because you can't use that size boat, but just a way to get down to the riverside with a canoe or kayak, and the one on North Williston Road, there's not much to it, Yeah, it's just sort of a very small parking lot and a path down to the river. That's really all you need, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other public comment, either in the room or online? I don't see any hands back there. Oh, I just saw one go up.
These are good eyes.
Good share.
Sharon, go ahead. Sharon, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I think it's a great idea. I don't think you need a vote for it because, I was on the Conservation Committee a century ago, and I think you could just, do a motion and then have the Select Board approve payments. So I would hope the Select Board might approve this going forward or something rather than having another meeting. And
yeah, we actually can't approve it tonight because it's not warned for action, and we do have some outstanding questions. So I think on a future agenda, we will have this as an agenda item for more information to come back to the Select Board, and we'll see what happens then.
I think it's a great idea. There's a lot of people that like to paddle out there, and to have another option besides Indian Brook would be fantastic. It's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Are we set to move on? Okay. Next on the agenda, update on 8090 Upper Main Street planning project for future municipal site. As Catherine's coming up, thanks to the Conservation and Trails Committee, and we'll see you at an upcoming meeting.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me this evening. Also online, we have Maggie Connor, who is one of our consultants from Stantec. So actually, Maggie is going to be doing most of the talking.
We
cannot.
get Maggie up here by any
Me.
chance?
So Maggie, oh, there she is. I can see her.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Am I going to be able to share my screen?
Give me one moment, Maggie.
Okay, great.
Once Greg works his magic.
Greg, actually, I need the other HDMI port for the sake of our recording.
Magic mishaps. One of those two.
Ah.
Okay, Maggie, try that.
Success.
Yay. I love it when it works out. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me there. I'm coming to you from apparently a very dark Pittsburgh, so apologize for the background. But Catherine asked me to be here tonight to give a quick and probably very high-level update on the Upper Main Street planning project. This is update number 1 for you all. It's the first of at least a few. I think we had planned 3 updates throughout the process, the idea being that we would brief you guys at each one of the 3 stages of our design process. So this is looking at master planning and ultimately conceptual architecture for the municipal site. And we had proposed stepping through this in these 3 phases, starting with discovery, where we kind of figure out what's going on. This is where we're doing our analysis and we're interviewing folks and just trying to get not just the lay of the land, but also understand a little bit more about the town of Essex and the relationship that you want to have with this site. We had sort of forecasted that that would work through the end of the month of August. So you can see the line on this slide is about where we are in that process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The second phase is going to be testing ideas, where we start to put pen to paper and look at different site planning alternatives and then work through architectural programming and eventually some conceptual architecture. And the goal then is to refine and report by December, so that you have sort of recommendations from us from this process by the end of the year. As I said, we are in the middle of that phase 1 discovery, and that for us, that really kind of kicked off in Essex with members of our team came to Essex at the very beginning of this month. We met with some of the folks in that room for sure. And we did a whole series of stakeholder and focus group meetings, and then also had the first public engagement. And so some of the key stakeholder groups that we met with included the local design team. We did a site visit, library tour. We met with some representatives from the Planning Commission, a couple of representatives from your board, several commission members of your volunteer commissions. We had more detailed meetings with the library and municipal services. Met with fire, rescue, and police representatives. We did meet with adjacent residents, specifically some folks that live on Old Stage Road and Lost Nation Road and back up to this property, and some of the adjacent commercial and business owners. We also, at the same time, and I would just love to make a pitch and encourage everybody in the room to check out the survey that has been posted on the town's website for this project. The survey was posted sort of on or around our public meeting, and it has some questions that are very similar to what we asked.
in the public meeting. And the idea is just to continue to get more feedback from community members. So we just would love to encourage that. And the idea is that that will be online probably for another few weeks, if not all the way until our next engagement. At the same time, I'd just also like to pitch that Catherine and her team have been keeping the website about this project up to date with information. And I think as we work through the fall on this process and on this project, we'll continue to keep our updates there. For the public engagement that we held on August 1st, for those of you that were there, you may recognize this board. We spent most of the time having, I think, a pretty engaging conversation with attendees. We had, I think, just under 40 people attend, which was a pretty good turnout for this stage of a project and for this time of the summer. And we really kind of gleaned from folks their thoughts on the, the potential character, some potential program elements for the site, goals that they'd like to see here, and then also identifying some challenges and concerns. And we asked a lot of similar questions of the stakeholder group as well. And while we are still compiling all this information, and we'll continue, we'll continue to document, analyze the site, and synthesize all this information, I did just want to give you all kind of a high-level summary of some of the things that we were hearing so far. And I thought it was interesting because, these were the ones that I pulled that were sort of consistently coming up in a lot of our discussions. So starting with some of the programmatic needs and wants that we heard from folks aside from the program that we've been given from the town, included things like the need for meeting space. We heard both about sort of civic outdoor space as well as indoor space that could hold about 200 people. The idea that meetings like this could be held there, or that other kinds of public engagements could be held there. The second we heard from a number of folks was a need for housing, specifically affordable or senior options, that there is just sort of generally a housing shortage, and that it's not unique or not exclusive of the town of Essex. Trails and natural connections were important and desired. I think there's a real understanding that this site has a lot of natural characteristics that are beautiful and could be impactful for the town. We heard a lot about community gardens, so it's interesting to hear about the boat launch discussion and the need for gardens. That's obviously a popular use. We heard about sustainability and efficiency, both for the buildings, but also for a project of this size, thinking about, somehow doing like a district approach to the buildings on site. The opportunity for more recreational uses to be integrated into the open space was identified. And then we also heard about a potential opportunity for Essex Rescue to share some space with the fire department, and there may be an opportunity there. They have some similar needs for storage and for equipment, and so there may be a benefit to finding a facility that could serve both. So that was for continued conversation. And then regarding some issues and concerns that we certainly heard about traffic and congestion on Upper Main and on Old Stage. So I think just a sensitivity that anything we come up with, especially with respect to access to the site, that is thought of, not just in terms of how the other buildings work, but also for fire and safety, that there is good ingress and egress. We heard about parking, but we also heard about access via trails and sidewalks, bike and ped. A real desire to retain the character of Essex, this idea of the agrarian roots, that this is not, we heard repeatedly from many different places that this is not South Burlington, and that it doesn't want to be. So I thought that was important feedback. We certainly heard people asking, how are we going to pay for this? So, I think understanding what the proposal will cost and understanding that cost sensitivity is an issue here. We will hold that through this process. That I thought this was interesting too. This didn't just come from the adjacent residents that we interviewed, but I think several people flagged just the sensitivity to adjacent houses and the fact that this has been green, this has been, open, sort of grassland, meadowland. And this is going to be a pretty big transformation. And so just being sensitive to the context. And then finally, again, related to the natural systems, the idea that there are a lot of mature trees on the site, and some of that natural character, there are also some wetlands to work around. And so thinking about how those can be incorporated and also safely retained. Just really quickly, a note on next steps. As I said, we're continuing our site plan analysis, developing design principles, and we're going to start testing ideas probably in the next few weeks. After that, we will work our way into architectural programming, and there will be stakeholder discussions and questionnaires about that. We're working with Catherine to start getting those scheduled. And then our next step, definitely not finally, would be an in-person engagement opportunity the week of September 30th. And we're currently targeting a public meeting on the evening of October 3rd. And the idea then would be to look at some emerging ideas around site planning. So we look forward to hopefully seeing many of you there and engaging meaningfully on this great project. So that's it.
Anything to add?
Just one thing to echo what Maggie said about looking for continued input from folks with the survey in particular at this point. And so encouraging anyone who's online or here who hasn't taken the survey to take it. There's some postcards here in the room that if anyone here in the room would like to grab one, there's a QR code to get you to the survey. But we're going to be trying to find other locations, other spots where we can give the survey out, maybe the first week of soccer, the youth soccer that's coming up, for example.
Questions from the board?
I have a quick comment, but football's going to start up this week at Maple Street, too. It got canceled tonight.
So are kids dropping off at school the first day,
There
too.
you
That's
go.
pretty packed.
Good point.
Thank you for all your hard work and for Maggie's. It was great working and talking to her when she was here. So.
Agreed. I do want to open it up to public comment in case any member of the public has questions, comments on the presentation or the project, either in the room or online. Not seeing any. Maggie, Catherine, thank you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
Our next item is to consider approval of warning for a bond vote in November 2024 for Center Road Forcemain project. Hi, Dan. Hi, Annie.
Dan and Ann.
It's Ann and Dan.
Ann and Dan. Yeah. Hello, Annie Costandi, Water Quality Director for the Town of Essex. So we are here to talk about the bond vote for the Center Road Forcemain. As you're aware, we have had numerous breaks on the Forcemain on Center Road over the last couple of years, totaling $175,000 in repair costs. Staff solicited proposals from engineering firms to replace the Forcemain and also upgrade the pump station. And we recommended to the select board applying to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund for steps 1 and 2, which is project design. And the total cost for the project design was $134,000. We received a subsidy in the amount of $17,150 for steps 1 and 2. So we are now on to construction, which is step 3. And we have to meet certain affordability criteria to receive any subsidy for step 3, but we are recommending that the town continues to go through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program or through the Vermont Bond Bank to have a bond vote for the replacement of the Center Road Forcemain and for upgrading the pump station. The total cost for the project is $1.75 million. Let's see. So we have looked at the advantages and disadvantages of going through a bond vote versus paying for it using capital funds. So I'm going to have Dan talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So, with the proposal, we contemplated the option of using available enterprise funds within that particular fund. Within that water sewer fund, there's $4 to $5 million of unrestricted fund balance. That's as of the last fiscal year audit for 2023. But also looking at our kind of longer term plans for the water sewer fund, we have over $9 million listed as potential capital projects within the water sewer fund over a 5-year period. Obviously, that's probably an aggressive schedule, but it does exhibit the needs and the requirements that we have to kind of keep our systems functioning well. So, in consideration of that, that's why we're looking to present the opportunity to have this vote on a bond that would cover a 20-year period at a maximum and be under a 5% interest rate. Obviously, we're at a 2% rate. With our initial offer, I had kind of reached out to the bond bank just to get a basic number from them, and they indicated somewhere between 3 and 4%. Obviously, it wasn't a formal bid process, but just to get an idea of options that were out there. Part of the reasons to go to a bond would be to increase our overall capacity, which is why I spoke to the unrestricted net assets that are in the enterprise fund right now. To determine if the town has an appetite for this project and possibly other projects down the line. And, a bond also allows the burden to be shifted over a longer period for the beneficiaries of who's going to benefit from this type of project over a 20-year period. Obviously, we hope it would last a longer period, but there's a matching element to that in terms of, having the beneficiaries pay for it as we go along. So those are kind of our initial thoughts on, why we look to present a bond or ask you to authorize a potential bond vote for November.
So staff is recommending that the select board approve the inclusion of a warrant article for the November 5th, 2024 election for long-term financing for upgrading the Heritage Estates pump station and replacing the existing sewer force main on Center Road.
Questions from the board?
I just want to ask, how is this construction and whatever's going on out there now, are you going to have to dig that all up again if this gets approved? Are you on the other side of the road where the break was?
We are on the other side of the road. So currently what we're doing now is we're installing a new water line, 12-inch water line.
Okay.
And that's going to help with our flows up in the town center. And we are also connecting some people to our water line that are currently located on Center Road. The sewer force main is located further down. It kind of starts near where the Sweet Scoop shop is. So there's a meadow across the street. And
Just
so
above where it broke. Okay.
yeah, and so we'd be coming across the street there, but our plan is to drill under the road as opposed to open trench because we understand that the impacts to traffic, to the houses, we're going to be going under driveways, but it's going to be located on that same side of the road as the Sweet Scoop shop, going down towards right near the entrance of Market 32.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know if we were doing redundant work here by having it.
No, they're different.
Okay.
Yeah, different work.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ethan?
So my, excuse me, my question was going to be the recommendation, and I simply asked this out of curiosity because it's sparked in my mind too, but it lists warning an election for long-term financing, but it doesn't say full amount of the project or partial amount of the project. And that brings me to my question was it ever considered to only bond half of the amount?
So I haven't gone through any particular numbers for a half, half taking 800, 900,000 of that. My perspective was that we're trying to increase the capital capabilities within the water sewer fund based on our current unrestricted fund balance. So for me to look at it, I think there's a longer term need to have a higher dollar amount. If we can secure a 2% rate and earn higher than 2% on the money that we currently have, that helps to it. I know debt isn't always the greatest option, but relatively speaking, this would be inexpensive debt to help with that size of a project.
And that's kind of where I was curious because you said 3 to 4%, not 2%. So is the $46 increase $65, or is it?
So the 2% increase is through CWSRF. The bond bank number that I mentioned was just me making an inquiry and getting a rough number. So in the, let me find, I think it's the top of page 76.
Annual bond payment based on a 20-year bond at 2%, the bond debt would increase by approximately 105,398, and that says there'd be an annual increase of 4615. That was with the 1.75 million in a new bond at 2%.
Yes.
But you just said that the new bond is going to be 3 to 4%.
No, I said I made an inquiry with the bond bank, and their rate would be between 3 and 4. But just as a comparative reference point to the 2% that was already in discussion with CWSRF.
And they were willing to bond us at that 2%?
Yeah, to my knowledge, they're still willing. Yeah.
I got really confused.
The bond bank was just to
Is it 2%
do a little bit of shopping, if you will, just to see if anything else was out there.
Yeah, and Ethan, the reason that staff hasn't decided whether to go with the bond bank or the revolving loan fund yet is because I think it's the revolving loan fund is when you have to start using federal requirements, or am I getting?
Yes, yes.
So once you start using federal requirements, you have to have certain purchasing standards that might drive up the cost more than going to the bond bank. So that would still, some analysis that staff would do. Aaron, I think, has started to think about it, and Dan and Annie, but that would be something that might trigger a little bit of figuring out the most cost-effective way forward too.
And I think the question is, like the analysis of, that additional 2%, where is sort of the cost benefit for adhering to more stringent development standards or construction standards as opposed to going with a higher interest rate? But it sounds like Aaron is going to be doing that.
Yeah, that's correct. The 2%, will have Davis-Bacon requirements with it. It will have Buy America requirements with it. So there'll be extra hoops to jump through, if you will, that add to the overall cost potentially. But whereas the bond bank would not necessarily be the case.
Right. Yeah, because my interpretation of, now hearing this information and reading is, 100% increase in the interest rate is a lot, right?
So
in my mind, and I would have to write this down on a piece of paper, but I'm fairly confident that I'd be successful in finding the numbers that I'm thinking in my head, is that if you have to go 4% for less restrictions, you would actually save money by only financing half, because with the interest rate and the capital fund, you'd be better off to pay 50% down payment and only finance the other percent, because in a business mindset, if I have $100,000 in the bank and I want to buy a tractor for $100,000,
you want to put 50 down.
by taking a loan out for $100,000 doesn't make me $100,000 in the positive.
Yeah.
Now I'm paying 7.5% interest for 7 years.
Yeah.
So, in my mind, if we were, that's why when the 4% really sparked a light for me, because if we truly have to go with the higher interest rate, you as an accountant, that's not my profession, but you know, that there would be ways to look at, is this make sense, or should we pay for half of it out of the capital because we're going to spend 100% more in interest
Yeah.
on $1.75 million?
Yeah.
Which is going to directly reflect to the ratepayer, you know, you would be, what would that be, 50% on 46.15, so you'd be $60-$70 increase on year one.
Yeah, it could.
4%.
Yeah, if it was a higher rate, it would be, you know, beyond that $46 that's kind of quoted here on the sewer rate increase. I would counter that by saying if we're able to borrow 1.75 million at 2%, not saying it has to be that way.
Great deal.
I would say it's a great deal. Yeah.
Same.
Yep.
I would.
So, you know, that's the idea. It was like we can bring that to the table, or you can obviously bring that to the table for the voters to decide if that's, you know, the step that you want to take. I still think from a larger perspective, looking down 5-10 years and the amount of projects that we want to do just within the water sewer fund, you know, this would be a nice financing piece to place in there so that we have the capacity to do other projects that are happening along the way and still have reserves for emergencies that come up.
And how much is currently restricted?
So as of our last audit, we had an unrestricted net position within the water sewer fund between $4 and $5 million. Some of that gets spoken to for prepaid expenses, but it's the true unrestricted was about 4.2 million.
How much is currently restricted?
The current restricted amount, let me grab that. It's really based on our net investment in capital assets. It's about it's about 3.8 million. So if I look at our last audit, I have it right here. It's a little over 4 million for unrestricted, a little over 800,000 for unrestricted designated, which is basically prepaid expenses within that group.
Right.
And then there's 3.8 million about that for net investment in capital assets. Which is kind of
used for any severe emergency.
Well, no, that part is already spoken for. That's already what our true equipment is and things like that. That's already spent money. It's just enveloped within our current capital assets within the water sewer fund.
Is reserved to maintain the value of the system.
Reserved to maintain.
Like none of that money.
That's not available for this future use, I guess is the best way to put it.
For future use.
Yeah, it's already spoken for in the assets that we have.
The 4 to 5 billion is what we have available for
The
projects like this or
Yes.
future projects.
Yep.
So if something happened tomorrow for $7 million, we'd be $3 million short.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to touch that other money because it's already spent.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much for answering all my questions.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a lot.
Kendall?
I think this is the perfect opportunity for Essex to finish the work that prior select boards have started with your excellent capital program that you don't adequately fund right now. First of all, to get in the SRF program, you have to have a short-term capital with 10-year items, and you have to have enough money in your budget to cover all those. I assume that you have that you've done the engineering and you have everything. The crux of that program is that you take an item, say a 10-year item that costs you $2,000, and you expect to replace that in 10 years. You budget $200 a year to replace the item. So if you've done that for all of your items, you know the capital cost that you need to replace those 10-year items. Then you've got your big items. When you're talking 3 to 4% interest on a loan versus making 3 to 4% interest on the money in the bank, that's kind of a wash. And I think that we should really consider, instead of asking the customers to front the bill for a bond bank with interest of that payment, that it's time that they invest in themselves. You could take, and you provided it here, if you took that money out of your capital and you ask the voters for that amount to go back towards your capital program to replace this, it wouldn't be the $87,500 you'd ask for. You'd ask for about $100,000 because you could figure a 15% add over 20 years would it cost to replace that in the future. If you started doing that with these projects, you would eventually reach the point, because you know that, you're the financial guy, you could figure it all out, that you would generate enough money through your capital program to fund the projects that you have coming up in the next 5 or 6 years. So it's all the towns do it. They all are in the same situation, except for very few of them that have done this in the past. They have these big problems that happen, and they go out and they bond for the money. They don't think twice about asking the ratepayers to make a payment of $50, but they don't ever ask them, make that payment to yourself, because it saves you the interest right off the bat, and you're investing in your capital program, which gives you the funding and the revenues to continue your capital program. When you sit here and say we've got $10 million of capital coming up, this is just the first bonding that you're going to ask the board to do. You want us to approve this as $50, then you're going to have another $3 million project or another $5 million project. Those are all payments, and you're funding the banks. I would really suggest, with the money that you've got in there, that you take the money out of your reserves and you ask the voters, the users, to pay that $100,000 back in a payment to capital every year. If you do that with your short-term capital and your long-term capital, eventually you'll be able to reduce those payments because you'll have more than enough money to take care of all your equipment. This is the piece that's missing in everything from a new police station to a new building or whatever, is that people vote to build something new or to buy something new, and then they never fund it thinking that, well, I'm going to need it in 20 years. We do it with a mower, we do it with a car, we do it with a building. That's the piece that's missing. So I am not in favor, when we have $5 million in the capital funding, of asking the voters to just go to a bond bank and pay interest of $20,000 a year for 20 years, when you could take that same amount of money and infuse the capital budget that we know is not funded adequately and build it up. So that's my 2 cents.
Comments, questions?
I just have a question if there's suggested wording for what they're asking today, because the recommendation isn't it.
Yeah, so you mentioned that before, and the recommendation, there is a language that would go on the ballot in the warning.
That's on the next one.
Separate.
It's on the warning.
Next page, I'm on the wrong
Keep going.
page.
It's on
Yep.
the warning. See, it was, right here it says Town of Essex Special Town Meeting.
So shall the
That's what
voters of
it'll
Essex,
say.
Town of Essex authorize the select board to borrow by issuance of bonds or notes an amount not to exceed $1,750,000. Is that what you're looking for?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I was on the wrong page.
Is there an opportunity to change that wording where they wouldn't borrow the money as long as it didn't exceed 2%?
Yeah. Or 3%. Because 5% is ridiculous. I mean, I've been waiting 3.5 years to refinance my house because 5% on $300,000 is about $180,000 over 30 years.
Yeah, and I
So-
think, I mean, this isn't saying it will be at 5%. It depends upon that different analysis and what those, I forget what you called it, but the construction standards, the
Yeah, like Davis-Bacon and Build-A-Mer.
Davis-Bacon,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Depending on what those are, and what the cost benefit is in order for which direction to go. So correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest here, but I think that this language is like sort of worst case scenario, max you could borrow at a max percentage.
I'm gonna be straight up with you. I'm a no on 5%. So
It doesn't say it will be 5%.
it says it can
Not to
exceed
exceed.
5%.
Not to exceed, you're right. Mhm.
So
Right.
That's without a definite on what we're asking of the voter. I don't support it. So if you want to tell us that we're going to the bond bank for 2%, great, I'll support it. But if you're gonna tell us that it could be 4% or 5% or it can't exceed 5, but it could be 4.99%, I don't. That's way too much money. It's foolish.
I have 2 questions to add to that.
Okay.
One is, can you refinance bond bank debt? Or is it you're locked into that and you can't change that for the length of the loan?
Not 100% sure on that. Most of the time when I've seen it in practice from my auditing days, it was just not refinance and the full term of it would be realized. So in most cases all the cases that I can think of, it's just been the full term.
Okay.
has
The
been
oth-
done
the other
without a
question I have
prepayment.
is that we already have about $300,000 in debt. Is there any opportunity to refinance any of that potentially?
I have not looked into that, but I can look into that.
Thank you.
What do you know the interest payment on this for 20 years, 5% at 1.75 million? Have you calculated that?
Well, that was the basis of the kind of $105,000 figure that's in the memo here.
But that is that
Don't-
yearly?
I'm sorry, what was
Is
that?
that yearly?
That is the increase to the
Every year.
annual rate, yes.
Yeah.
So
I don't have-
$46 a year for 20 years is what it was proposed.
Yeah.
But that's an average user. It's
It is an average user, so it's not a blanket thing like a tax rate would be per se.
I mean, are any of us really thinking that spending $1.75 million in our personal life at a 5% interest rate is a good idea?
I think it's worth asking the voters if that's what they want and allowing that analysis to happen with staff to understand the Davis-Bacon analysis, the trade-off, what the increased construction costs would be based on those requirements, and allowing them to identify a path forward. I would also be interested in understanding that the ballot, the language for the ballot needs to be warned by the 23rd. Is that what was in the timeline? And that's 4 days away. I'd like to understand what the risk is. Should we not meet that deadline and move forward with this tonight to ask the voters what
You'll
they
be doing
think?
a separate ballot at Buku Big Bucks.
Yeah, we create a
Thousands and
separate
thousands of
election, yeah.
dollars.
Yeah. So in order to get on the general election ballot, we would need to send the language by August 22nd. If we don't send the language, then we have to send a separate ballot
Yep.
and pay for that cost. So that would be the difference. It is written, I think in the
The
nets.
max amount would be roughly $12,000. I did
Yes.
the math on the higher end of each of those items.
For
Can-
special.
Can
Yeah.
I go back and ask one more question though about, because in the memo you sent us, not the part where the vote is, it says that the current, let's see, that counts for, I lost my place. With the additional annual bond payment based on a 20-year bond, this one says at 2%. But you're asking us to approve the ballot up to 5%. I just, there's a big difference there in cost, I mean, money.
Well, I guess the thing is that we could go through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and that is at 2%. But it just means that we're going to be subjected to those additional requirements.
Okay, so the 2% came from the clean water.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is a
It's
rate
available.
that we
Okay.
can get.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just that Dan reached out to the bond bank to see what interest rates they're seeing right now, and they're saying it would be 3 to 4%. If we went that route, we would just
Okay.
not have be subjected to those construction requirements.
Okay.
And we had put in the 5% just to give a little bit of wiggle room in case those rates from the bond bank change.
Yep.
I
plus
guess
the
I
first
would-
Rates are supposed to change anyway, so, yep.
I guess I would say, trying to get the indication and count some votes here. Staff's recommendation is that this go to bond, and that we, well, ask the voters if it can go to bond. I'm hearing right now that we don't have 3 votes to make that happen tonight with the language that's presented, and please tell me if I'm wrong. But
Well-
if that is the case, what is a number that is, what is an up to amount that's gonna make you feel comfortable? Because it is a recommendation that we ask the voters about the bond.
So there's only one way you can swing me tonight, and that's if you can explain to me why it wouldn't be acceptable to go with the latest and greatest practices that the state of Vermont's offering with clean water, especially as the clean water coordinator.
We have no problem going with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. It just, we do it all the time. Most of our grants already require Buy America and Davis-Bacon. That's not something that's new to us. It's just a little bit more work on our end. So we don't have a problem if that's the route that you want to take.
Do you have a rough idea of what those increased costs would be?
Not off the top of my head, no. I would have to look at the plans and figure that out. We didn't do that in depth of an analysis, but we could.
So you would approve it if they went from the 5% to
Well,
the
I'm just gonna
2%?
ask, but like all of the beautiful work that you've orchestrated around town recently in the past couple of years, but like to my understanding, all of that was to the newest requirements.
Yeah.
All the ditching that was done on the back roads, and I know there was a lot of clean water retention that was diverted and solved. And did you find that it was 50% more in cost?
No, it kind of came out. I mean, it was a little bit more expensive, but that was more of the fact that rates have increased due to the pandemic. So that's really where most of that increase in cost came from, and not necessarily the additional stuff that we have to do. So.
Because I mean, I just feel that there's a large portion of this town that would be understanding and acceptable to take this to a vote at 2%. I feel like if you told them, I might spend $1 million, I might spend $6 million, you know, over 20 years. I know it's not that intense, but it's not far off from that with the interest. That's like so under promising to me that we want you to approve this, but we're not going to tell you what we're actually going to spend. In this case of, okay, this is 2%, this is the amount we want to finance, you know, this is the scope of the project, we're not to exceed 1.75 million, we're not to exceed the, you know, the 2% as long as that's locked in or whatever. You know, I just feel like it'd be a lot more clear to say the town of Essex is requesting a bond for 1.75 million from the, I'm sorry, I don't know the letters, CWRB?
SRF, yeah.
CWRB. You got it.
So,
For this project, and boom, it's like you're telling me what you're doing. You're not asking if you can do 3 different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
1.75, 20 years, 2%.
discomfort in it is the large change in cost and interest.
So does that 1.75 million, that's the total cost of the project regardless of whether it includes the additional construction requirements?
Yeah,
yes.
It's those are really like administrative add-ons for this type of requirements, going through Davis Bacon, Buy America, Build America.
In other words, there's more work for the two of you.
Yeah.
But she's already doing it.
Yes.
All of our
To
other
some degree,
projects.
yeah.
Also of note is that typically our construction costs include like 10% contingency. So the project may be under 1.75, but we have that additional, like if there's any unexpected construction cost, that's included in that 1.75 million.
So the SRF, I want to say SLF. I have a different hat on. Do you have any concern in going that route and putting the 2% in the warning?
I think I'd
Ask
yeah.
it
Yeah, no.
maybe a different, is that 2% absolutely guaranteed
Yeah.
from the revolving loan fund, or is that subject to go up at all?
I don't think it's subject to go up.
Okay.
I feel pretty confident that it's going to stay at 2%.
Are you confident that you will actually be able to be funded by SRF? Because there is a cutoff of priority projects and stuff like that. So that's kind of a big question.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard differently.
Yeah.
Everybody that we've talked to seems to be confident in us moving forward this route. So, I mean, I haven't heard any feedback that we wouldn't be able to receive funding.
Okay.
And I think that's where I'm like, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah.
Bucket is if we warn it at 2% and it goes to 2.5, then we cannot move forward with it.
See,
So having that little bit of wiggle room.
We'd be comfortable with that. It's hard to be that, spring into gear, but It's time. It's time to start doing business different. If you pay attention to what's happening in the state with the budgeting and all the stuff that's going on, you got to start thinking about the vision of the future of a self-funding, sustaining, putting your money to work for yourself. And just going to the bond bank or SRF and just financing the usual way with an interest payment of $20,000 a year for 20 years when you know you got a bunch of projects coming, when you could take a turn right now and start investing in yourself. It's a basic thing, a financial thing. Pay yourself first. It's not a hard lift. Essex has already done probably 60% of the work. You guys have a capital tax. You have capital programs, you have all the funny stuff. The only piece that's missing is bringing that number to the board to put it on us that, hey, we need X dollars instead of X dollars to fully fund our program. And here's how we're going to do it. So I'm willing to be the stick in the mud and stand here and say this. I don't want to do a bond. Not, 2% when you can earn 5% in interest, basic, that's great. But no, not 4 or 5%. If your interest rates tank next year, you've saved that 1.7 million to make 1% when you're paying 5%. So
I feel like I need to say that the capital tax is not a part of this equation, though.
no, it's separate. But
Yeah,
both of them.
But I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
and
because it's a water sewer fund, it's an enterprise fund, it's on its own as a self-sustaining.
And I think we're getting a little bit into item H, which is
Yes,
the budget
you will.
goals.
I'll have to get that.
So to move this along, so that we can then go ahead and discuss putting it on the article itself, I am going to make the motion that the select board approve the inclusion of a warned article for the November 5th, 2024 general election for long-term financing for the upgrading of Heritage Estates pump station and replacing the existing sewer force main on Center Road. And that way we can move on to the warning.
Thank you. Dawn, is there a second?
Are we making two motions tonight?
You have to go back and approve the warning, yes.
That's what we are doing. The next item is to the mailing of ballots.
Yeah.
So just a point of order, that motion is just to get us to discuss the actual article?
Correct.
It can be amended at any
Okay.
point after the motion is made.
Okay.
I would second that. then.
Okay.
Just
Thank
to
you,
get it-
Dawn.
That's what I
Thank
was-
you,
I'm
Kendall.
confused about.
Discussion on the motion.
Do we know what the 3% is going to cost on 20 years total?
So I was able to find the 2% number. The 2% total interest number is $374,000 estimated
Okay.
over the life of that. So,
You're-
you know, if you wanted to add a percent to that, I guess it'd be $187,000, doing quick math like that. So 187, 374, call it 560,000 at a 3% would be a total interest ballpark over that life of 20 years.
So 45% or 40% of the property. 45% increase. Simple, right? So I'm gonna say I really hate to be the guy that I guess I gotta ask the question that if this gets shot down and it gets shot down to put it on a special, what is the option? Take it out of the capital?
I guess the option would be funding it out of our current unrestricted balance, which is, it's there. As I've stated before, there's $4 million there, but to look longer term at other items we'll need to fund and finance, whether it's through the water rate itself, sewer rate itself, how that happens would be to be determined.
For it's capital funding, but since we were talking about that, one of our priorities is making sure that we're adequately funding capital so that, it reduces the need for these kinds of conversations. So while it doesn't help us in this immediate conversation, It is on our work plan. It is one of our priorities. We're going to be talking about budget goals in 3 items.
So I'll be honest, my fear is, and I feel bad that this is a fear, but my fear is that by voting no on this, I'll be the deal breaker, and then come a meeting or two later, we may have a full board, there may be a passage, I just cost the town $12,000, personally. But on the flip coin of that, if the town decides to go 2% or the whole thing fails as a town vote, and we end up paying for it out of the capital anyways, I just saved the town $500,000. So personally, I'm in a really tough spot to make a decision because I don't like 5%. I think that's foolish. I don't want to not fund the project. I think that's foolish. I don't think we have the availability to take it all out of the capital. I prefer to take half of it and bond half of it at 2%. I know that's not on a proposal. I know we have 3 days. So this is probably like the hardest decision I've ever had to make as a select board member.
Did you say we don't have the option?
No, until the
to
warning,
go for-
you haven't approved the warning, you can change the amount on there, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not an approved warning.
We should
the
be able to.
23rd.
That's
A lot of changes.
You can do that tonight.
You can do that tonight.
That's what the motion is for. That's what we're discussing.
That's what we're discussing, is this the way you're gonna
Is what
present
we're
it at
warning.
5%? Do you want it
If we're
changed?
warning.
Yeah, so this gets us to the point where we're not the ones that turn down the bond because they've got to put in that detail.
Yeah.
But we will have a lot of say on the next article about what the actual article they vote on says, I expect.
No, that has to be in by the 23rd. The question has to be in, right?
Yeah, we are considering approval of the warning for a bond vote.
This thing right here.
Article 1.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I'm worried about.
And then you can still, because it
Change.
hasn't been approved, you can go in and change the amount. And that would still give the time to get it signed and sealed and delivered to the state to be on.
And
Tell me if
Ethan,
you-
considering that the warning is, you bring up the language, with an interest rate not to exceed
Yes.
5%. If you wanted to make an amendment to decrease that amount, you can do that.
Yeah.
So quickly off the top of my head, so I don't make this last all night, I feel comfortable with 2%, the full amount, or I would leave in the up to 5% for half the amount. Those are the two things that I would approve. I wouldn't approve anything else. If anybody else has any comments.
And I'm good
too.
with 2%.
Can you make it work at 2%?
I think we could make it work at 2%. Yeah. I mean, it's basically what is on the table now from the state revolving fund.
Yeah, we're just talking about language on a ballot. I don't think that, Annie and Dan are going to go out for what
Right.
makes the most financial sense.
No, I'm just making sure we have availability. I don't want to crash the project.
Yep.
I just want to do it in a way that might save $500,000.
And I would also point out that, should there be funds, and it would make sense to only bond for half of that amount. It is also amount not to exceed 1 million, so we could bond for less than that should the voters approve the up to 1.75 million.
Well, I'm asking processy here,
Mhm.
but would we have final say on how much the bond is, or no?
I think as long as the voters approve it, authorize the select board to borrow, so I assume that we would need to approve that at a future meeting, should the voters approve
The initial
the
article.
initial article.
And then we could have a discussion to say what's only approved half. If we wanted to, because it's up to. Is that under interpretation?
I
possibly?
assume that there's no reason why that wouldn't be able to happen.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, these are big questions. If I told my wife I wanted to go spend $1.75 million on some farm equipment, she's gonna ask me these questions.
No.
We're getting them right
she's
now.
gonna
I
say,
can't
"See
give
you
you an
later."
answer right now.
I've already
That's-
spent $708, so I'm getting there.
Yeah. So, I mean, this would mean that the voters authorize us, the select board, to borrow up to
Okay.
an amount at an interest rate up to a certain percentage. So my non-legal self
Okay.
says that anything less than that up to is, it's approved by the voters.
Right. So you could leave the amount in, the $1,750,000, and just change not to exceed to 2%. Would that work for you guys?
That would work.
Yep. We could have a unanimous vote.
We need an amendment first,
I'm
because the motion you made was for,
Get rid of it.
Mine was to go ahead and go to the warrant, so, and now we're discussing the warrant.
the inclusion of a warned article, but the article is listed in the packet
Oh.
as
There's only one
5%.
memo.
So just to make
Okay.
it clear, we
All right.
should,
Recommendation.
So I'm not sure how you want me to proceed. You want me to make the
you
motion to
can
approve
move-
it
you can
with
move
the
to
change?
amend the motion to be
Okay,
2%.
all right. I make the motion that we approve the warning of this, it's the special town meeting official warning. And change Article 1 to not to exceed the 2% for the purpose of upgrading the Heritage Estates pump station.
Okay, so,
Does that make it?
yep, the motion is to amend the
Warning.
right, the warning to be not to exceed 2% for the
Correct.
purposes.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion to amend?
Second.
Thank you. Ethan, we're voting on the amendment to change 5% to 2%. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. So now the motion in front of us is the warning not to exceed 1.75 million at an interest rate not to exceed 2% for the purposes of.
Correct.
Is there further discussion on that?
I would like to see some way to ask the customers if they want to do this or they want to invest in the capital. Is there any way to do that?
Yes or no?
Hmm?
Well, you could have that as a ballot item on your town meeting ballot. And that would give you
Oh,
plenty
to-
of time to research what you want
talk
to say.
capital and everything. Okay.
Yep.
That's
Well, and ultimately it will be. We're talking about the budget goals
Right.
Yeah.
and the.
But I'm
budget
saying
will
you
get
can make that
voted
a
on and-
specific
Yep.
vote on your town meeting ballot.
I mean, if you present that right, it just, if I'm given the choice of borrowing money, I'm not gonna borrow money, I'm gonna pay myself. You know that, so. Makes it easy for me.
All right, so are we ready for the question?
Mm-hmm.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0.
Now, because this has to be done as soon as possible, the changes will come to us via, I just want to make sure we're all in line tomorrow to do this, to get this signed off.
Oh, the warning itself.
Yeah,
Right. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll get that out tomorrow.
okay. Because I know there's a change, so we can't use the one that's in here, so.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So, do you want to stay for the next one, or?
The mailing of the ballots?
Yep. You're more than welcome to. It's fine. I just.
Sure.
I can speak
Yeah.
to
I'm
that
like, I
one.
can't speak
I
to
think
it,
the
but
memo.
I can stay.
Yeah,
Want to wing
okay.
it?
I was like,
I think the memo is pretty straightforward. Nanette put that together. Basically, there's a chance to get this question onto the ballot that the states are going to mail out.
oh,
To do that, you have to vote to mail ballots to all active, not challenged voters for the election. If you choose that, the state will take care of it. They'll print the ballots, they'll mail the ballots, no cost to the town. If you choose not to mail to all voters, then the town will be responsible for printing those additional ballots, mailing them to anybody who requests the ballots, absentee voters, early voters, stuff like that. So staff's recommendation is that you vote to mail to all active, not challenged voters, and let the state handle that process and that cost.
And I wholeheartedly agree.
Do we need public comment?
Sure.
Or should I just make a motion?
Yeah, let's go to public comment before a motion, if there is any public comment on whether to take the state up on their offer and have them mail our ballots for us. Go ahead and raise your hand.
Should I come up or can I just talk from here?
Could come on up to the microphone for the folks online.
I'll be real quick. We should absolutely do that. It's way cheaper and it's way easier and more efficient to vote that way. So yes, do it that way.
Perfect, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, Ethan, over to you.
I make a motion that the select board approves putting forth a bond article in November for the Center Road Forcemain project. That the article be included on the general election ballot, and that the select board vote to mail ballots to all active, not challenged, registered voters.
Thank you. Ethan, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dawn. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. Which brings us to our next item, consider adoption of the investment policy.
Annie, you want to do this?
Yeah, thanks, Ann. Yeah, that's fine.
And can I?
Thanks, Annie.
All right. No, that's fine. Off you go. It's
Thank
okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I wanted to make it clear that it can be kind of difficult, like maybe we're not going to approve your project or something like that, but that has nothing to do with staff or anything. I'm just pointing out the capital part of it. So I know you've done a lot of work for the project and everything. I want to make sure that it is no reflection on staff of any way.
Oh, yes. I didn't think that, but I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Kendall.
All right, for the investment policy, this was originally brought to the board a couple weeks ago at the last meeting on August 5th. It was recommended that some adjustments be made to better describe some of the functionality with the finance department and the treasurer's role. So there's been some additions there and some verbiage there. I've also added some verbiage to kind of widen the possibilities for us for not just Vermont-based organizations and companies, to expand it within other areas of the United States. I added in the NCUA piece to include credit unions. And I think generally those were the changes which are listed out in the board book as you've seen them here tonight. So we are looking to previously was authorize the investment policy. Tonight we're looking for the select board to approve the Town of Essex investment policy as it's listed here in the packet.
Any clarifying questions?
No, I just want to thank you for making the changes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. Yep.
So with no questions, I'm going to go to public comment first, if there is any public comment on the investment policy. Seeing none, bring it back to the select board.
I make the motion the select board approve the Town of Essex investment policy.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. You ready for the question? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And I will say the same thing to you, Dan, that I said to Annie, that it does not
Yeah.
reflect on you at all. You're doing an excellent job. It's great. I appreciate all the work that you do, believe me.
Sure. Thank you. Yep. Yeah.
We're having a triple dose of Dan this evening. Are you going to
I can stick around. Yeah. If you want me to stay here, I can do that too.
Our next item is discussion about select board budget goals for fiscal year 2026. So if you'd like to stay, you're more than welcome to stay.
I was going to stay anyway. If you want me to stay in this chair, I can do that as well.
Stay right there.
Okay.
Can you switch chairs?
Stay comfy.
Well, obviously, Kendall's concerns need to be adjusted in the budget process. So.
All right, I'm gonna run to the bathroom really quick.
Yep. So I'll go ahead and start to introduce this. We have been speaking a little bit throughout the strategic planning sessions, as well as last meeting. We were asked to start looking at goals and priorities for the FY26 budget, so that staff can incorporate those into the budget that's presented to us. Understanding that this is just a discussion, we're giving feedback on what we want to see, maybe what we don't want to see, but just to inform staff who is putting together the preliminary budget to present back to us. So Greg, anything to add to that?
Just a couple minor things. This is something we do every year. It's a chance to talk about what are your goals, what are your priorities. Is there a tax rate increase that you want to target? Is another piece of information that can be useful if you have something in mind. But really, it's just a chance for you to start thinking about the next budget, early as it may seem.
I have to say, the time seems to fly between these budgets.
We just start a fiscal year.
I was gonna
Let's talk about the next fiscal year.
Well, I would, for me, I would think given the economy and the way we don't, what's going to happen is keeping the tax increase to a minimum. I mean, I know insurance is going up 19 point some percent and all this, so it's like, it's going to be hard to do, but,
And I think to Kendall's point, one of my priorities, it's not so much about limiting ourselves to the number and keeping it as bare bones as possible, but it's about having departments come back to us with what they truly need.
Yep.
Thinking toward those 5-10-year costs and what it's actually going to take to fund that. Because to Kendall's point, penny wise and pound foolish to limit ourselves to a certain percentage of a tax increase, knowing in 5 years we would have to be in the situation where we're borrowing money at an interest rate, and that doesn't serve the taxpayers. That serves the other side of the interest rate.
I mean, that really is the goal. I mean, I think it's probably surprising at the board level how much of this information staff has. Like Annie said, Aaron's an engineer, so I'm sure he's got an asset management program and he's got every cost probably right down to the shovel that he needs. It's just simply getting it to the board, that 10-year plan and then the longer term, because that's the piece that's missing. And once the board sees that and the customers see that, then they understand that, oh, well, we just paid $6,000 for a mower, and I know it came out of the operating budget. Something like that shouldn't come out of the operating budget. Anything more than $5,000 should be in your capital plan, and you should be planning through that to fund that. When you start moving those items out into your capital plan, your operating budgets will start to be more level. You won't need big spikes and big dips, giving some back to the taxpayers and then doubling it back. You'll kind of level off because those items like the mower and the 10-year items will come out of your capital plan. But the key to that is to provide the customers with something you can easily find to go with your capital program that has all the things you need to replace, with the cost broken out to, here's the budget line item that we're putting in every year based on these 10-year items and 5-year items and 6-year items. So anybody can look. And then the way that it works is that we all know just because something is 10 years old doesn't mean you're going to replace it, is that ultimately you start having a little bit of extra money because maybe you have an item that you have to replace sooner, but you've got that money from all these other items going into the capital, so you pay for that. And then you have items that go longer, so the money you're paying in for them can go to the other. So it's a self-sustaining process, but you have to take that first step to go to the customers and say, look, we don't want you to come up with $50 in your bill for a bond payment. We want you to come up to $50 into your savings that will ultimately steamroll and save you a lot of money. So I know the information is there because you guys present excellent capital budgets and budgets every year with a ton of information, but it's like, how much money do we need to put in the budget to meet your capital needs? Thank you.
Any other budget goals?
Beyond what's on the list?
Sure.
On this?
I thought you had a question.
No, I just didn't know.
no,
I didn't know if we were opening this
Yes,
back
so
up.
No.
No, it's just general discussion on our budget goals for.
I do have a question though, and before you go ahead. You want to answer that before I ask? Go ahead.
I just want to say that list is on there just to kind of focus you, show you where you've been, where you're going.
Yeah.
It may or may not, budget goals may or may not be related to that. It's not looking at revamping that whole list. That's
Okay.
just there as a reference point. So, yeah.
Just wanted to be sure.
Thanks, Tom.
So, no, you're fine. So is there a way, so yes, each department presents their budget. Is there a way to see a comparison of how well, let me use the police department. So they fund CGRC, okay? But we only get an amount, so CGRC needs this amount. We don't see the actual breakdown as to where that money, that budgeted money is going. And I noticed a lot in the warrants that they use a lot for all these other programs, but I don't know, did they have enough in their budget to cover it?
So
Because I don't remember seeing
you're
stuff.
speaking about Community Justice Center.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, CJC, yeah. So you're not seeing, it's not directly in our general fund. It's a separate fund, but it is self-sufficient.
Okay.
So for example, last fiscal year, there was about a $320,000 grant that they receive.
Okay.
And they spend that fully.
Okay.
And then they also have some unrestricted revenues. You know, I'd have to look back and see what those
No,
amounts
but
are.
I'm just saying, it's the out groups that I'd like to see if we're.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these are the things that kind of show up more through the audit process in terms of, like I know we had the long discussion last year about the fund balance allocations
Mhm.
and, you know, how that all worked out. And CJC is one of those items that's within that group as kind of a subgroup of the general fund. So I can get you information on the CJC operations. We've been doing reports, you know, for their annual function.
You know, it's in. Sorry. It's in a different position. I'm having a hard time with it tonight. It's just, so are we funding what we're funding in our budget? Is it covering the needs of each department? I want them to come and tell me, absolutely not, or yes, it was just, you know, right on. Because I can't say approve somebody else for more money if they had more than enough to start with. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so. Let me, if I can sort of.
I don't have the tech.
Let me say some stuff back to you and see if it lands conversation, I guess. I think it makes sense. I think what we've, me and my predecessors and past select boards have always asked departments, for the most part, tell us what you need to operate.
Right.
And they do. The flip side of that is, and sometimes it's more spoken and sometimes it's more unspoken, within reason, within an acceptable amount, within an amount that's going to get approved by the select board and approved by the voters. And largely that's been, 2, 3, 4%, 5% tax rate increase that the select boards have targeted, that the voters have seemed willing to accept. So can we keep operating at that amount? Yeah. But for the past few years, we've level funded capital. So we're falling behind in some things. Stuff like I keep referring to Parks and Rec and the amount of workload they have. There's a lot of goals to look at the fiscal year 25 work plan. There's a lot of goals there for Parks and Rec, forest management, rec needs assessment, maintaining our properties, expanding programmings. They're going to need more staff.
Okay.
To do all that stuff, we're going to need more staff.
Okay.
Or to completely revamp and take away a lot of stuff that's being done. And I just use Parks and Rec as one example. There's
but I'm saying,
Public Works, as any, ComDev with the change to DRB. There's going to be a lot of departments that need to strongly could use, but we're reaching into the need category to add stuff and to really add stuff. And so there's a difference between maintaining operations and making do and getting by and cutting it as much as possible to just scrape by for another year. And then there's if we really want to do what you're asking us, what the town is asking for, what our residents are looking for, we're going to need more. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Don.
Well, it does, but I need to see. No, I mean, I need to, to see it. But no, that's good.
Yeah.
So that rolls me into my question, Greg, because
Uh-oh.
when I saw the word in here, high level, I started thinking for a couple days, and I said, how do I make my concerns that I've raised over the last year and a half high level? And my question that I prepared for today was pretty simple, and it was to ask Greg how you would like me to portray budgetary concerns that are directly related to operating procedures. Because as a high level of the select board, we're here to approve the budget, not tell you how to tell your employees how to do their job. But at a certain point in time, as I've raised this before, and I'm not even going to go down the capital hole because we're talking about budget, at what point is there going to be at least a comparison, if not a low-level study, to say the town's throwing away $100,000 a year mowing lawns? You know, where, when, and how does the select board, if it's of the group, make that conversation? Like, how does that? I don't understand, honestly, how to stay high level about the budget when there's small things that are happening operating that are completely affecting the operating budget, which, like I said, I wouldn't go there, but long term affecting another part of our town capital. Sorry, I said it again. But how do we connect those two conversations without telling you that mowing lawns is a bad idea? You know, I'm just using the
So
lawns
you're looking at like
as an example.
services that could be put to bid.
Yeah, I think.
So that was the only question I wanted to bring tonight was developing a relationship with you as the town manager that we can raise those concerns and they can be vetted. Let's just say in I'm gonna say timely manner, but that's not the right word. But I'm just saying, like, I don't want to be in, you know, the end of December, mad and having 800 receipts on, you know, lawnmower repairs from you and staff because there's an issue when I could be more high level and you can be more high level of what your duties are every day. That's what you already are doing.
Right.
And we can have that relationship where we're not telling you how to do it. We're just saying this amount of money that it took me a long time to think of this professionally. That this amount of money that we feel is excessive or repetitive year after year. What is your plan to correct, or ideas on things you might be able to change, or things that you can tell us we that can't change that, you know? So that was my only goal today, was to figure out a path forward instead of saying this. I can say, okay, this chunk of money in operating for repair and maintenance, you know, or staff time. You know, you talk about hiring more staff. Well, if we, you know, I'm going to use the mowing tonight because that's on my brain, but kicked off 3 guys from mowing because they were more valuable, you know, fixing benches and pulling invasive roots out of the park or whatever, you know. So that was my goal today.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you, I think part of that, you know, high level goal, make sure that we have cost effective operations.
Exactly.
I think to get into the weeds and the specifics, you have some specific questions. Bring them to me. And I know you have in the past. And it helps to know that stuff now, before November and December when, you know, last year was Marguerite who was trying to track down a bunch of tiny questions and go into the select board. And I don't mean tiny as in they're not meaningful. I mean as in there's a lot of stuff there. And so the more lead time we have, if there's specific things that you have in mind, that any of you have in mind about why does this work, why does that work, why is this costing us money, and you do that with the check warrants now. But if there's specific stuff that you see coming up, then let us know. And sometimes maybe there's something we can do differently. Sometimes it's going to be that was a bum piece of equipment,
right?
And it happens.
We just don't keep it for 35 years.
Yeah. Which gets into.
I know. I'm not going there.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I really did, like, I thought this whole thing, when I was thinking about it, I was like, you know, my mind goes right down the rabbit hole and this, and then I was like, wait, this isn't the question, because I like that you put the high level in there, because you always say that to me, like, let's keep this. I'm like, no, seriously, that's a good point, because we can give you specifics of categories, not items, and then, you know, I don't know if I'm rambling, but if that makes sense to you, that was what I wanted to find was a better way to communicate those, what we feel, or as a board or as individual board members, to be an issue.
And it's
more successful.
It's, as far as the mowing goes, it's been a few years. Ally did look into it a few years ago, and I forget what the number was, but it was going to be not cost effective to contract out the mowing of all our properties. Is it time to relook at that? Probably. And Adrian's already started to have some conversations with some of the property owners and the areas that we maintain, and Parks and Rec and Public Works have sort of shifted who's responsible for what. So I think that'll help, just to bring up mowing example. But yeah, certainly, we'll look at cost effectiveness of operations. And again, if there's specific ones, please let me know.
I mean, staff has always been extremely responsive with their information and the way they do things, and anything that we've ever found that if there's a better mousetrap, they're always the first ones to jump on it. So, I mean, towns are all the same. You get highway departments or rec departments, and it becomes all of theirs, and you look at the big picture of it's less expensive for us to do it, without maybe taking in that piece, is that you've got one little piece way over here that's 10 miles on the other side of the town that takes them 5 minutes to mow, that even though it's cheaper, it's not really cheaper when you add in the amount of time and effort and things that go on to like that. And all towns are that. So.
I just have one more question, and maybe it's not budget oriented. To look at if it would be cost effective, in looking at the warrants, we seem to do a lot of time chasing parts, chasing pieces and parts all over, you know, from this hardware store and that hardware store. Is there a way to like make a central hub or a central, let me see, pre-plan some of this so they can have it on hand and they're not, in other words, I don't know, we don't do any maintenance of our own on our trucks, basically. It looks
We do.
like, we
do.
But not any major, I mean.
There's a certain point at which we ship it out.
Okay.
But yes.
And like the police cruisers, they all go to the various garages around. And I understand they're, sharing the services, which is good. But I didn't know if there was, but then again, we ran to this place to get a headlight, or we ran to that place to get a spark plug. Do you understand what I was trying, I mean.
Sorry, are you speaking like, should we have one shop where maybe we can get a discount?
Exactly, or even okay, so we know that we need this amount of light bulbs, or we need this, I don't know, I can't think of what I've seen on the warrants as far as chasing stuff, but can't we have something in stock somewhere that we don't have to be running around? And sometimes if you see the same thing being bought over and over and over again, you buy it in bulk, you save money. It's just little.
We have it. Yes, I think so. We have a very active mechanic on staff, who stays quite busy. But I can check with Aaron and Public Works.
But I would think it'd be easy for him to have what he needs right there instead of having to wait for somebody to go chase it for him.
And to your point, if it's something that gets replaced every week, every day, I mean, that's what I'll ask about and try to.
There was a fan belt for a truck. Well, in the school bus business, we have one of each fan belt for our buses right there in stock, so we don't have to run around and send somebody to chase it. And the mechanic stands around waiting and wasting time, and it's just maybe it's not, maybe it's just me, but I just seem to think we spend.
The flip side of that is maybe the mechanic's reordering the one he took off the shelf.
I don't know that. That's what I'm saying. I need to.
Is that like Charlie Boys or like the parts store down here?
There's it's both. It's it's different places, and it's not just it's not just part. It's like building stuff. We went to Ace Hardware to get a light switch. Well, why don't you have a light switch in stock? I just it's.
And you paid $4 more for a light switch than you would have at an electrical company.
Yeah, so I'm just and it's the time chasing it and the gasoline used chasing it, and it just doesn't just seem cost effective. That's all. It's just a question.
Make sure you tell our mechanic we love him. He does a great job.
Oh, no, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying, but yeah, so he would, you know.
Mechanics are hard to find.
I just think it'd be. I think you've missed my anyway.
That's the problem I really had though, Don, because last year I went through and I found all of these individual items and I requested information and the root of what I was getting at was not even poor ownership, but poor previous planning put us in a financial disadvantage by owning equipment that costs more to maintain than it did to operate. So the root of my problem was that was the plan, not the fact that we spent $100,000 fixing it. You know,
Yeah.
rentals
Oh,
and
no, I hear.
repairs and
Okay.
all that.
Yeah, I
but
hear what you're saying.
I could also, you know, go to the lowest part of or say, I don't know if the town does, but for example, why doesn't the town have a hydraulic crimp machine in the shop? You know. But the main root is, why are we spending so much money in, you know, that's why I'm really having a problem, honestly. And that's why I brought it up earlier, to be totally transparent with the public and with you, to build a stronger relationship, is finding a way, a doorway, which we're going to create, we are creating, to express those high level 25 things that you figure out the 25 things. We just say the root of, you know, that's what I've come to learn, is that is, here's the root, you know, and that's going to be my goals that you already know for this year is public works and, you know, certain other 3 things. But I don't know if tonight, are we having that nailed down budget, or are we going to wait till budget day to kind of, as a board, duke it out as for what's most important?
No, this is just high level.
High level, that's what I
high level
thought, yeah.
goals
So-
to inform the creation of.
The budget day.
This is just the very, very first
step
of many conversations.
I'm hearing tell you what we need to operate and make sure we're operating efficiently.
Yeah.
Does it for
No
me.
more repair bills. No more repair bills.
If there's no other board input, I do see a hand up in the room, so I'd like to open it up for public comment on budget goals.
Microphone gets so low. Hi, Ken Signorello. It took so long, I made notes, so I didn't forget anything. So, no, I hear the comment that, you know, a lot of things want to get done and there's not enough staff to do it, and priorities have to be set. Totally understand that. But I want to remind the chairperson that the current budget that we're in now, a month and a half in, includes a position for a trail coordinator. This is a position that the Conservation and Trails Committee is very interested in, obviously. You've heard about that from some of our members before. And I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is the search for that position has not even started yet. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's what we've been told. You know, I don't want to see us in another situation like we are oftentimes with the police department, where at the end of the year we've got this huge surplus because somebody that was supposed to be hired didn't get hired, and then that surplus gets turned into fund balance instead of returned to the voters. It's always a problem every year. It seems we have that for the last 9 or so years, a surplus, luckily. If we had that position filled, and the Conservation and Trails Committee has offered to help with that, and haven't had that been taken up yet, but we'd be happy to help, since we think that probably would become our liaison, which of course a part-time position, and then that would free up a full-time position. We currently have somebody, a full-time person from the planning department that services us, and that could change. So it's a double benefit if we can get that done. I think it would be great. Position like that, if it was filled, might have been handy for investigating the Winooski River project, for example. You could have just sort of handed it off to that person. It would have been under their purview. So I just want to mention that the budget's been approved. We have money. Let's hire. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. I was just going to ask if there was an ETA on.
The Trails Coordinator is open. I'm well aware of that. We also have at least one more opening in Parks and Rec right now. The director had left recently. We have an internal promotion, so we have an opening in Parks and Rec. We are taking a really deep look at the structure of the Parks and Rec department to best fit the needs of what they have and what they're trying to be responsible for, which is everything from parks maintenance, including trails, to the community programming, to the events, to the many questions and programs and desires that we've heard from the select board, from our public, from our conservation and trails committee. So because of that, the trails coordinator we have not yet advertised for, because we're trying to figure out who that person is going to report to and the best way to structure that entire department, to then have a trails coordinator come on to do that. So I don't have an ETA yet. I am hoping we're going to advertise for the other current opening within the next month or so. I think that'll provide clarity as to the trails coordinator and exactly what that role is going to be doing, who it's reporting to. I don't see that person being the liaison to the Conservation and Trails Committee. Part of the reason the planner is the liaison to the Conservation and Trails Committee is because they are also advisory to the Planning Commission. And so all of the development reviews and site plans that go before the Planning Commission get input from the Conservation and Trails Committee. The planner is the person who does those development reviews. That's the person who can best speak to and explain and get input from the Conservation and Trails Committee and relay that to the Planning Commission. So the Trails Coordinator could very well be a support person. They might be one of the staff liaisons to the Conservation and Trails Committee, but at this point I still see the planner being, one of the primary people, if not the primary person to the Conservation and Trails Committee, for the reasons about the development review.
Thank you for the update.
So again, yeah, thanks for the feedback, and yes, it is open, and there are reasons for it.
You raised the point of why the planning department is our staff liaison, and that's true. One function that Kent does provide for us is he brings all of the programs, all of the developments to us, and we go over them and make recommendations in writing and for submission to the planning commission for him. But there are meetings where we have none. So he just sits there and really doesn't really do anything for us per se, other than just open the doors. And
So I think I want to refocus this to the select board budget goals for fiscal 2026.
Fair enough. So the trail coordinator would be, if we can get that job hired, I think that would be either that, in fact, our mission statement includes 3 departments. Community development, parks and recreation, and public works. Any one of those 3 does work for one reason or another. So, but the trail coordinator we have identified as our best likely candidate. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. I'm not seeing hands up online. So with that, I'm going to move past the discussion of select board budget goals. Next up, consider designating delegate for Vermont League of Cities and Towns Town Fair meeting. I believe it's October 1st. There is a business meeting via Zoom that we can appoint a voting delegate to. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy has expressed interest in doing so. If anyone else is interested in attending that, and
Madam Chair, as chair, are you interested in doing that?
if Andy is interested, I am happy to have him participate in that capacity.
Then at this time, I'd like to make the motion that we appoint Andy Watts as our delegate to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns Town Fair meeting, sorry.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Clear on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. With that, we do have one item for executive, but let's move along to the reading file. Board member comments, any input on the reading file?
It was neat looking back at the old records on Susie Wilson Road.
That was interesting.
It was really neat.
And I guess we would thank John Bourbon for his brief service on the EDC.
Yes, thank you. I did want to bring your attention to 7E. an update on the state's request to the Planning Commission to consider zoning changes. Wanted to make a note that this is informational only. The process that is being followed is the process that exists for any other potential zoning changes, development applications, so on and so forth. So again, informational only, just so everyone is aware of that process, and that did happen at the last Planning Commission meeting. So that is in the pipeline with the Planning Commission currently. The other item that I wanted to make a note of, our strategic planning process did have a goal of supporting committees, commissions, increasing communication, identifying needs. I do firmly believe that it's not just the select board should take a participatory role in meeting those goals. I wanted to let you know that I do intend on moving forward with, for the moment, I'm calling it Coffee with Committees, having a standing monthly meeting for committee chairs, vice chairs, to meet with myself and other members of the select board. Obviously, we would want to coordinate administratively so we're not running into quorum issues. But if anyone is interested in joining me to increase participation, feedback, and have some conversations and get to know our committee chairs and vice chairs on a deeper level, you're more than welcome to let me know, and I'll throw together a scheduling app or method to avoid quorum issues.
On that same note, should we also include the tree farm management group? And there seems to be concern that we weren't communicating with them.
I don't see why not. Anything else to the reading file? Okay. We do have an executive session motion.
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the proposed public official appointment in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 to include the town manager, and this is the candidate.
The option's there.
Okay.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay.
Night, Sharon. She just said.
With that, motion carries 4-0. We are now in executive session.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we appoint Ally Vile as our representative to the Essex Tree Farm Management Team.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0.
Madam Chair, I make the motion we adjourn.
Thank you, Dawn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Motions to adjourn are non-debatable. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. We are now adjourned.
Thank you.